Hours of GTA 5 federal bedtime lore. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks because this is a long one. You can let this play while you drift off, or keep it on in the background while you scroll, but we're going to stay locked on one thing tonight: the FIB, the IAA, and NOOSE, and how they quietly run Los Santos like their own personal crime syndicate. This is all GTA V lore, start to finish. No money guides, no glitch talk, just a long, slightly unhinged info dump about the fake government that's supposed to keep order in a city where half the billboards are for lawyers and the other half are for plastic surgery. In reality, Rockstar builds the FIB as their FBI parody, the IAA as their off-brand CIA, and NOOSE as this weird DH/SWAT hybrid that only shows up when things get truly out of hand. And we're going to treat them like real institutions with histories, grudges, and body counts. The pacing here is simple. I'm going to talk. A lot. Minimal pauses. Casual tone. Like that one friend who starts ranting at 1 a.m. about how the government did 18 different conspiracies before breakfast. We'll jump from in-game missions to radio shows to background websites, and it's also revealed that almost every time you thought you were doing a random shootout, somebody in a suit was quietly pulling strings in the background. The big question running under everything is this: in a city where everyone is a criminal, what happens when the federal agencies are the worst crooks of all? The FIB is supposed to be the cleanup crew, but you see them blackmailing Michael into off-the-books operations. The IA is supposed to be about foreign intelligence, but they're torturing suspects in Los Santos suburbs. NOOSE is the tactical response team, but every time you see their chopper, it suggests the state would rather send a paramilitary squad than admit anything's under control. Across this video, we'll go wide and deep. We'll start with their real-world inspirations, from FBI surveillance culture to CIA black sites to the post-9/11 security obsession that NOOSE is parodying. After that, we'll move into key missions like Three's Company, Monkey Business, and the wrap-up, and break down what those actually say about the FIB, IA Turf War, because it's believed that Michael, Trevor, and Franklin are basically disposable assets in a quiet federal civil war. By the end, we'll zoom out again and look at how these agencies shape everyday life in Los Santos. From news anchors parroting FIB talking points to random NPCs complaining about wiretaps. So dim the lights, lie back, let the sirens and helicopter blades blend into white noise. By the time you wake up, you'll never look at the FIB tower downtown, an IAA badge on a loading screen, or a NOOSE fan at 5 stars the same way again. So before we get lost in conspiracies and car chases, you kinda need to know who's actually running the show. Because in reality, Los Santos isn't just gangs, CEOs, and washed-up actors. It's 3 little acronyms quietly deciding who lives, who dies, and who gets blamed on Weasel News. The FIB is the easiest one to read. It's Rockstar's straight-up parody of the FBI. Domestic, federal, and very obsessed with looking like the good guys on TV while doing some extremely not good guy things off camera. They've got that big glass tower downtown, they run investigations, wiretaps, and anti-terror stings, and it's believed that they've got a COINTELPRO-style history baked into the lore, with agents bragging about infiltrating protest groups and ruining lives during casual office banter. The IA is the FIB's evil twin that pretends to be overseas only. It stands in for the CIA, officially about foreign intelligence and covert ops, but constantly dipping its fingers into domestic stuff whenever it smells money, influence, or a chance to embarrass the FIB. You see their logo on that coastal facility in Monkey Business, and right away it's revealed that they're running black site-style experiments and fake terror plots that sound a lot closer to PR stunts than national security. Then you've got NOOSE, the loud one. NOOSE is a federal tactical force that mixes SWAT, Homeland Security, and counter-terror units into one blunt instrument. When you hit 4 or 5 stars and suddenly a noose chopper is in the sky and armored trucks are pouring out squads with carbines, that's not just escalation. That's the game showing you what a militarized police state looks like when it stops pretending. They don't really care who started it. They just show up and turn the whole block into a training exercise. All three of these agencies are Rockstar's way of satirizing post-9/11 security culture. Endless wars on terror, vague threats, and bloated budgets that always need a new enemy. Radio shows and in-game websites keep talking about credible alerts and heightened security, while the story quietly suggests that a lot of those threats are manufactured, so guys like Steve Haynes can keep their funding, their fame, and their torture rooms. This would make a lot more sense in the context of the main story, and that's where you come in. Michael, Trevor, and Franklin don't just brush up against these agencies, they get drafted into their private turf war. Three's Company drags you into an off-the-books extraction, where the FIB uses you to kidnap an IA asset. Monkey Business has you stealing nerve agents from an IA facility so the FIB can look like heroes on the evening news. The wrap-up turns Devin Weston's parking garage into a three-way execution attempt between FIB, IA, and Merriweather. Then you've got the big FIB heists, like the Bureau Raid, where you literally break into federal headquarters, either as fake janitors or full-blown commandos, just to help one corrupt team of agents beat another. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice that every time you think you're doing a smart score, you're really just unpaid labor in a federal pissing contest. So grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and these aren't just background logos on loading screens. In the next part, we'll start peeling back how the FIB, IA, and NOOSE actually got this powerful in San Andreas, and who had to disappear for that to happen. So to make sense of that federal pissing contest, you kind of have to zoom out and look at what Rockstar is copying from the real world. The FIB, the IAA, and NOOSE aren't random acronyms. They're straight up parodies of the FBI, CIA, and every three-letter tactical squad you see on the news when something goes horribly wrong. The FIB is the easiest one to read. It's the FBI with one letter moved, and it keeps the same job description on paper: domestic investigations, counterterrorism, organized crime. You see their big glass headquarters downtown, the crime labs, the cubicles, all of it suggesting this serious law and order image. But in reality, almost every mission you do with Steve Haynes or Andreas Sanchez is about bending the rules, faking warrants, and running off the books black bag jobs. Dialogue during Three's Company and the wrap-up straight up implies they've been spying on activists, journalists, and random nobodies for years, which is basically Gita's Cointel Pro joke without saying the word. It's also revealed that the in-game media knows this on some level. Weasel News anchors talk about domestic extremists in that breathless, fear-mongering tone, while talk radio hosts rant that if you ain't sleeping, you should be stockpiling guns because the FIB is watching you through your Life Invader account. That stuff mirrors real debates about surveillance and the Patriot Act, but pushed just far enough that you can laugh at it, unless you've read a headline that sounds way too similar. The IA is the CIA's evil twin, which is saying a lot. Officially, they're about foreign intelligence and covert operations. You raid their coastal facility with Michael and Dave in Monkey Business, and it's believed that place is a stand-in for black sites and off-the-books labs. The game suggests they topple governments, run regime change ops, and experiment with nerve agents, all the usual spy thriller material. But the satire kicks in because the IA is constantly meddling inside San Andreas too, grabbing suspects on US soil, planting evidence, and running their own terror scares just to get funding. That's why the turf war with the FIB feels so real. Both agencies are doing the same shady things. They just argue about who gets the credit. Then you've got NOOSE, which pulls from DH, SWAT, and federal counter-terror units. When your wanted level spikes and noose trucks and choppers roll in, you're basically seeing the game's version of police militarization. Heavy armor, assault rifles, armored personnel carriers in the middle of downtown because you robbed a jewelry store. It's funny until you remember actual news footage looks almost the same. In-game radio ads and Weasel news segments keep mocking security theater, showing airports strip-searching old ladies while noose blows up half a block chasing one suspect. This would make a lot more sense in the context of real-world war on terror profits. And Rockstar knows you'll connect those dots. But if these are just parodies, why do so many FIB, IAA, and NOOSE operations in GTA V feel uncomfortably close to real headlines? And what happens when you dig into the specific missions, the missing people, and the names buried in their files that you never meet on screen? Out in the open world, the first thing that sells you on this whole security state vibe isn't a mission. It's the Skyline. You're just driving through downtown Los Santos. Maybe you're free roaming. Maybe you're doing nothing illegal for once. And that FIB building is just sitting there, towering over everything. It's this glass monolith with the logo you can't escape. A constant reminder that even when you're just cruising, the game wants you to feel like someone is always watching. You can't even really avoid it. From the freeway, from Vespucci, from the golf course. That building is in the background of your life. At night it's lit up like a beacon, and in reality it works almost like an extra minimap icon in your brain, because you always know where federal power lives. When you finally raid it during the bureau raid, it's also revealed that the interior is full of surveillance rooms, server banks, and agents monitoring screens. The heist just confirms what the Skyline has been quietly suggesting the whole time. And when the game wants to show you how that power actually lands on the street, it uses the wanted system. You start with LSPD cruisers, regular cops yelling the usual stuff. But as you push it, as you shoot back or steal something bigger, the response escalates. SWAT-style teams, armored trucks, choppers, and then NOOSE shows up as the federal Sledgehammer. That pipeline from blue uniforms to black tactical gear explains how Los Santos treats threats. Local cops until the system feels scared, then full-blown militarized response. The funny part is, you see the same logic in the background chatter. NPCs on the sidewalk complain about random terror alerts, or talk about some plot that got stopped at the last second. The Weasel News segments brag about foiled IAA and FIB operations that sound weirdly vague, like nobody's allowed to say what actually happened. Then you go online in-game and find sites and comment sections hinting that a lot of these plots might be exaggerated or even staged by the agencies themselves, which would make a lot more sense in the context of how desperate Steve Haynes and his rivals are for funding and fame. All of that bleeds into the main characters long before you meet a single agent. Michael's paranoia, the cameras around his house, the way he flinches when a black SUV slows down near Rockford Hills. It's believed that this comes from years of living under Dave Norton's quiet supervision. Trevor doesn't just hate the government in a meme way. He rants about black sites and secret wars, because, in his case, they're real. Franklin feels like the game is rigged even at the repo job level. And when he finally gets pulled into federal work, it just confirms what he already suspected. The people at the top never play fair. So by the time you're dangling outside the IAA building in Three's company, or getting swarmed by NOOSE in the wrap-up, you already feel that Los Santos is under watch. And the twist is, the biggest tension isn't criminal versus cop. It's FIB versus IAA, with NOOSE flying in as the blunt instrument when their quiet war spills into the open. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because the deeper you go into that rivalry, the more the whole map starts to look like their personal battleground. And that battleground doesn't start in Los Santos, it starts in the snow. with 3 guys and a bad plan. North Yankton, 2004. Michael Townley, Trevor Phillips, and Brad Snyder walk into that Ludendorff bank like it's just another score. You've played it 100 times, but if you ain't sleeping, listen to how scripted it actually feels. The alarm goes off, the hostages are down, they grab the cash, and then everything starts to go sideways way too fast for a normal small town response. Roadblocks pop up like someone read the heist script in advance. The getaway car gets hit, Trevor's improvising with the farmer's truck, and you can already feel that something about this ambush suggests federal planning, not just local cops getting lucky. On the tracks, Brad gets lit up. Michael takes that chest shot, and Trevor is left screaming into the blizzard. Then you hear it, the clean, distant sniper round that drops Brad for good. That's not random. That's Dave Norton making his career. Dave Norton is an FIB agent who at that point is basically a nobody. He's stuck in a dead-end post, chasing low-level targets, and he needs a headline arrest because his bosses are breathing down his neck about numbers. So he cuts a deal with Michael before the heist even happens. 1 body, 1 arrest. And in return, Michael gets a new life under witness protection, a big house in Rockford Hills, and an open tab of future cooperation whenever the Bureau needs something dirty done off the books. It's believed that Brad was always the body Dave planned to trade. Michael sells out his own crew, Dave sells a fake story to the media, and the FIB gets to put out a press release about a heroic agent stopping a notorious heist gang in North Yankton. In reality, Michael is alive in Los Santos, Brad is rotting in a grave with the wrong name on the headstone, and Trevor is the only one left in the dark. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how the FIB operates later. Dave fabricates evidence, manipulates the crime scene, and files Michael under an assumed identity, all without a clean paper trail. That's your first real example of FIB corruption in GTAV's timeline, years before you ever pull up to Michael's house in the intro. It's also revealed that the arrangement never really ends. During Dead Man Walking, Michael snaps at Dave, saying, "You tell me to meet you at the morgue. You put me in danger." Dave fires back with, "You owe me. We had a deal." By the time you get to the wrap-up, Dave is panicking about his own bosses, saying lines like, "They know about you, Michael," which explains why he keeps dragging you into FIB versus IA operations. That one sniper shot in the snow basically chains Michael to the Bureau for a decade. And because this is Ta, that single dirty deal is exactly what will drag Franklin, Trevor, and the whole of Los Santos into a federal turf war you'll spend the rest of the game either cleaning up or making a lot worse. Grab some snacks, because the fallout from that fake death is where the FIB, the YA, and even NOOSE really start showing their teeth. So when that fake death drags you into the FIB's orbit, the first thing you really meet isn't an agent, it's a building. That huge sterile glass monolith downtown, with the flag out front and the logo that looks one lawsuit away from the real FBI seal. From the street, it's just another federal complex. The kind you'd see in DC or downtown LA, all sharp angles, mirrored windows, and a lobby that feels like a bank married an airport. When you walk in during the story, you get that corporate security theater. Metal detectors, armed guards, keycard doors, the little roped-off lanes that suggest order while everyone inside is quietly panicking about budgets, scandals, and who's leaking to Weasel News. The marble floors are polished, the plants are fake, and every wall has some motivational poster about integrity that, in reality, reads like a punchline once you know what these guys are actually doing. Rockstar never gives you a clean org chart, but the building itself kind of explains the structure. You've got investigations floors with cubicle farms and whiteboards covered in mugshots, string, and acronyms nobody fully understands. You've got implied counter-terrorism units buried deeper in the tower, watching grainy camera feeds and drone footage, while they scream about the IA stealing their cases. Internal affairs types are suggested by those glass-walled offices where no one smiles and everyone carries a file thicker than the Bible. Then you've got field operations, the guys whose desks are half paperwork, half body armor. The culture inside that glass box is just as layered. Steve Haynes is the careerist face of it, a guy who treats terror threats like PR opportunities and turns raids into reality TV. Dave Norton is the anxious survivor, clinging to his pension and his secret deal with Michael, trying to look clean while standing knee-deep in mud. Around them you see nameless paper pushers, it guys, and analysts who just keep the machine running because they need a paycheck, not because they believe in any of this. It's also revealed that the FIB's world stretches way beyond that lobby. You see evidence rooms stacked with crates and hard drives, interrogation spaces where suspects disappear off the books, and blacked-out SUVs shuttling people to off-site safe houses. Missions like Three's Company and the Wrap-Up show you rooftop helipads, emergency stairwells, and those anonymous garages where temporary holding can last as long as someone upstairs needs leverage. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how every bland hallway suggests another hidden room, another server rack, another place to bury a secret. It's believed that a lot of the FIB's real work never touches the main tower at all, happening in rented offices, suburban safe houses, and those creepy industrial sites you only visit during off-the-books jobs. And this would make a lot more sense in the context of what's coming next, because if this is the respectable face of federal power in San Andreas, what does it look like when the mask slips and the FIB goes to war with its own rivals? When the mask finally slips, it doesn't fall to the floor. It smiles straight into the camera. That smiling face is Steve Haynes, the guy who makes the FIB's paranoia look glossy, scripted, and completely normal if you ain't sleeping while you watch it. Steve Haynes is a high-ranking FIB agent, but in reality he acts more like a Vinewood producer who just happens to have raid teams on speed dial. He's charismatic, always tan, always perfectly relaxed, and he treats Michael and Trevor like they're props he rented for the season. During Three's Company, when you first really see him in action, he's not worried about torture, international law, or any of that. He's worried about camera angles, about how this operation plays against the IA, and about how fast he can turn it into leverage for his own career. His show, The Underbelly of Paradise, is where it all comes together. In-universe, it's sold as gritty reality TV about law enforcement in Los Santos. But what you're actually watching is federal propaganda with jump cuts. Every segment blends fear-mongering about terrorists and drug dealers with slow-motion shots of Haynes posing with a rifle, walking past news trucks, and giving speeches about freedom. It's believed that most of the threats he talks about are either exaggerated or manufactured, because the show needs ratings and the FIB needs funding. Haynes' dialogue really explains who he is. He throws out casual threats like they're small talk, makes racist jokes about suspects and even his own colleagues, and he's always bringing up budgets, optics, and who signs the checks. To him, terrorism and organized crime are less a problem and more a content pipeline. A bomb scare is good television. A botched raid is only bad if the cameras weren't rolling. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how he constantly reminds Michael and Trevor that they're expendable, while he's the one doing the voiceover. Because he's chasing that hero edit, Haynes is the one who keeps escalating the FIB, IA turf war. He pushes for riskier and riskier operations, like storming the IA building or staging chaotic street shootouts with news support, just so he can frame the IA as incompetent on his show. Everyone else is in the line of fire, agents, civilians, even his own assets. Haynes stands behind cover, barking into a headset about how this will play great in Washington while Michael and Trevor are the ones actually catching bullets. And the scary part is that Steve Haynes isn't just the villain. He's what happens when a system rewards spectacle over justice, when the war on terror is a brand, and when agencies like the FIB and IAA compete for screen time instead of safety. Because as his ratings go up and his operations spiral out of control, the IAA isn't just going to sit there and let him win. And the next move in that shadow war is about to drag you even deeper into it. And sitting right next to that chaos is Dave Norton, who is basically Steve Haynes if he drained out the ego and left only the ulcers. Dave is the other face of the FIB, the one you see when the cameras are off and the paperwork is stacked to the ceiling. Where Haynes chases ratings, Dave chases antacids, because every day that North Yankton deal stays buried is a day he gets to keep his badge. Dave Norton is introduced as the guy who took down Michael Townley in 2004. But in reality, that big career-making bust was staged. Michael sold out Trevor and Brad. Dave fired the shots, and the FIB wrote it up as a heroic shootout in the snow. His file says he neutralized a major heist crew. The truth is he turned a backroom bargain into a fake win and chained his entire future to one suburban witness protection project in Los Santos. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how burned out he is when you finally meet him. You don't get a swaggering action hero. You get a mid-level agent in a bad suit, meeting Michael on a park bench like it's a custody exchange. Their relationship is half friendly, half blackmail. One minute he's calling Michael old friend. The next he's reminding him that if the FIB ever finds out the North Yankton op was rigged, Michael goes to prison and Dave goes down with him. During missions like Dead Man Walking and Three's Company, it's also revealed that Dave constantly needs Michael to do his dirty work. He drags you into morgues, ER interrogations, and off-the-books raids, all while pretending he's doing you a favor. In reality, the favors only go one way. He keeps saying the Bureau is watching, that internal affairs is sniffing around, that budget cuts mean they need results, and every one of those excuses pushes him to bend the rules a little further. You even hear him panic about audits and internal investigations, stressing that if the numbers don't look good, people start asking why a supposedly dead bank robber is living under a new name in Rockford Hills. Those lines quietly explain why he tolerates Haynes, why he signs off on insane stunts like blowing up a lab or torturing a suspect. If you ain't sleeping, you can really hear it in his voice. This is a guy who knows one bad report could pull the thread on everything. And Dave is not on the same page as Haynes. He hates the showboating, hates the torture TV vibe, but he's trapped inside it. The FIB looks like one agency, but what you actually see is a nest of competing agendas. Haynes chasing fame, Dave chasing survival, upper management chasing budget increases. Grab some snacks, because the IAA is watching that dysfunction very closely, and the next time they make a move it's going to drag Noose and the entire city into their little family argument. The FIB is messy, loud, and always trying to get on TV. The IAA is the opposite. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and this is where the shadow war really starts. The IAA is basically Los Santos' CIA. They're the foreign-facing counterpart to the FIB, officially focused on international threats, espionage, and covert operations that are supposed to happen outside U.S. borders. On paper, the FIB chases domestic crime while the IAA handles terrorists, rogue states, and shady corporations overseas. In reality, the game keeps showing you that those lines are mostly a branding exercise, because both agencies are constantly dipping into each other's business whenever there's money, prestige, or leverage on the table. You can feel the difference in their whole aesthetic. FIB agents show up in blue windbreakers, open offices, and that big glass box downtown that screams, "Please shoot a rocket at me." The IAA rolls darker suits, tighter formations, and facilities that feel like they were designed by a lawyer who really loves the phrase, plausible deniability. Their headquarters is right near the FIBs, but you see way less of its interior, and that actually explains a lot. The FIB wants you to see them working. The IA wants you to forget they exist until it's too late. The missions and ambient dialogue suggest the IA is running stuff the FIB can't even put in an email. It's believed that they operate black sites, offshore interrogation rooms, and proxy operations through shell companies and contractors. The torture sequence with Mr. K is technically an FIB job, but it's also revealed that the intel trail is tangled up with IA sources and their foreign contacts, which hints that this is just one visible node of a much bigger, uglier network. You get stories about rendition flights, secret cargo coming through the port, and liaison work that sounds less like diplomacy and more like outsourced war crimes. Because of that, the FIB and IA hate each other in a very specific way. Both agencies are competing for funding, for narrative control over the war on terror, and for who gets to brief the politicians on TV. FIB guys call the IA incompetent eggheads who play spy while the real work happens at home. IA guys fire back that the FIB are cowboy cops wrecking carefully built operations. Each side accuses the other of overreach, leaks, and screwing up missions just to steal credit. This would make a lot more sense in the context of their first big on-screen collision. The Mission 3's company is basically a turf war in daylight. You, as Michael, literally rip a target out of IA custody, dangling from a chopper over downtown, while both agencies scream about jurisdiction. It looks like an action set piece, but it's really the moment the FIB, IA, and even NOOSE start dragging you fully into their private feud. So when you hit 3's company, you're not just doing a cool mission. You're watching the FIB and IA basically start a custody battle with helicopters. Steve Haynes and Dave Norton drag Michael back in. And because this is Michael, that also means dragging Trevor in by default. The setup is simple on paper. The IA is interrogating Ferdinand Karamov in a high-rise downtown. The FIB wants him, and you're the idiot they send to go steal him. Haynes sells it as national security as usual. He says Karamov is some foreign asset, a guy the IA grabbed and are squeezing for intel, and that the FIB needs to extract him. In reality, Steve just wants to walk into the IA sandbox and kick over their toys. You get Franklin on Overwatch, Trevor flying the chopper, and Michael playing the world's most underpaid spy. Because if you ain't sleeping during this part of the story, you can see how fast he's losing control. The actual operation is staged like a Vinewood action scene. Trevor hovers the chopper outside the glass tower. Michael smashes through the window, grabs Karamov, and then Trevor just dangles him from a rope over downtown Los Santos. Snipers on the rooftop start lighting you up. IA agents are screaming, and you're hanging over traffic like a human piata while Franklin picks off threats from a nearby building. It's loud, messy, and very public, which is exactly the point. This is the FIB committing interagency piracy in broad daylight. They're not just stealing a suspect, they're hijacking an entire interrogation from another federal agency and turning it into a set piece. The way Trevor swings the chopper around, the way Michael is just a dot on the end of a cable, it's believed that this is Steve Haynes, showing the IA that he can walk into their house, take their guy, and leave them shooting at the sky. Noose units and helicopters get stirred up in the chaos too, which quietly explains how deep this off-the-books feud has already gone. Haynes' motives are layered. On the surface, he wants information, but his dialogue suggests he cares more about humiliating the IA and proving to his bosses that he can get results no matter what laws he breaks. It's also revealed that he's feeding this kind of footage into his TV persona, using real Black Ops disasters as background for his tough on terror narrative. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how he talks about ratings and optics later. Karamov himself is basically a MacGuffin with a pulse. He's strapped to a chair, screaming in Russian, swapped between agencies like a briefcase. Nobody cares who he is, they care who gets to say they own him. He's a symbol of jurisdiction, proof of who's winning the shadow war. After the mission, nothing is actually solved. The FIB doesn't end the threat, the IA doesn't back down, and Michael is now officially tied to an aerial kidnapping that half the city probably filmed on their phones. Three's company doesn't cool things off. It escalates everything. The FIB has tasted how far they can push it. The IA has been publicly embarrassed, and Noose is getting dragged into federal pissing matches. And the next time these agencies collide, they won't be fighting over just one man hanging from a cable. And that cable leads you straight into one of the strangest places in the game, the IA's glass box of pain. When you drop into the IA facility during Three's company, the interrogation room looks almost boring at first. It's all glass walls, harsh white lighting, and that flat clinical furniture that feels like it was ordered out of a government catalog. The room is designed to project total control and fake transparency, because you can see everything. The guy in the chair, the agent looming over him, the instruments on the table. But the trick is that this little aquarium is surrounded by a larger system you don't see, and that's where the real secrets live. The glass suggests honesty, like, look, nothing to hide, but in reality it works more like a display case. You're watching one stage-managed act of brutality while the real decisions are being made in offices you never enter by people whose names never pop up on your HUD. It's believed that the whole setup is for show, for superiors walking past, for internal cameras, maybe even for other agents who need to be reminded what happens if they step out of line. The rest of the floor reinforces that. Outside the room, you've got this sleek, almost boring office environment, cubicles, screens with intel feeds, agents calmly typing like they're doing spreadsheets instead of torture paperwork. The contrast explains a lot about modern intelligence work in GTA V. The violence is loud and obvious in the center, but everything around it is sanitized, ergonomic, and HR compliant. If you ain't sleeping yet, this is where the game quietly tells you that the ugliest stuff is now a desk job. NPC chatter during and after that mission backs this up. You hear agents talking about other sites, other detainees, other packages being moved. The way they speak suggests this room is just one node in a huge, global IA network, with black sites and safe houses scattered way beyond Los Santos. And if this is the one they're willing to put behind glass in a downtown office tower, what do the off-the-books locations look like? Compared to the FIB, the vibe is completely different. The FIB is chaotic, media-hungry, full of guys like Steve Haynes who treat every operation like a TV pilot. The IA feels disciplined and secretive. More we don't exist and get my good side. But it's also revealed that both agencies are using the same playbook. Illegal detentions, proxy wars, and civilians like Michael and Trevor as disposable assets. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what's coming later. But just remember that glass room. Because after you leave, the game never shows you the rest of the IA's world. It only lets you imagine what's happening off-screen in places you'll never get to raid, with people who don't get a rescue mission. And just when you think you've seen the worst of the IA's glass rooms, the game quietly asks a new question. What happens when the FIB and IA stop spying on people and start playing with nerve gas? Monkey business is where that answer shows up in a wetsuit. Michael and Trevor are dragged in by Steve Haynes and Dave Norton, who claim the IA has grabbed a chemical weapon and is planning some kind of false flag. Because of course, when the FIB needs to protect America, they don't call a proper task force. They call the two guys who robbed a jewelry store last week. You're told to infiltrate a government facility, steal a canister of nerve agent, and hand it to the FIB so the IA can't use it. The way you get there already tells you what kind of world you've stepped into. Trevor pilots a submersible in under the docks, attaching it to the hull while Michael swims in through a maintenance tunnel in full scuba gear. The whole underwater approach, the murky green lighting, the quiet radio chatter, it all suggests you're slipping under the surface of San Andreas into the part of the map that doesn't exist on the pause screen. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one when it comes to how deep these agencies go. Inside, Michael changes into a hazmat suit and walks through sterile white corridors and glass-hidden labs, with scientists calmly working on whatever nightmare is next. It's also revealed that nobody panics until the alarm goes off, which explains how normal this is for them. Nerve agents, locked vaults, armed guards, and it's treated like another Tuesday. In reality, this is Rockstar showing you the military intelligence industrial complex of San Andreas, not with a cutscene speech, but with fluorescent lights and humming refrigerators full of death. The important part is how the FIB chooses to handle it. Instead of a public operation with NOOSE, clear oversight and evidence, they send in deniable assets. 2 felons, off the books, lied to about the objective. The IAA is painted as the bad guy, but the mission quietly confirms that both agencies are completely comfortable moving weapons of mass destruction around in secret. It's believed that this is just one facility out of many, and you're only seeing it because Steve needs plausible deniability. By the time Trevor steals the canister with the crane and the FIB shows up to secure it, the confusion is total. The IA says it was a controlled sample, the FIB claims it was a terror plot, and you never get a straight answer on who actually owned that nerve agent in the first place. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a real terror threat, but the game never gives you one. What you get instead is a turf war. Agencies fighting over bioweapons in the shadows, rewriting the story as they go, while guys like Michael and Trevor do the dirty work. And that's the point. The scariest people in Los Santos aren't the imaginary terrorists on the news. It's the ones buying the commercials. So once you see that the terrorists are mostly paperwork and PR, you start noticing who really benefits. It's not you. It's not the people stuck on the Del Perro freeway at 5 p.m. It's the agencies fighting over who gets the biggest slice of the fear budget. The game actually tells you this straight up if you ain't sleeping during the radio and TV segments. You'll hear talk show hosts joking that the FIB needs a fresh atrocity to keep their funding, or a caller saying they miss the good old days when you could scare Congress with one grainy photo. Sant News will breathlessly report a credible threat, and then a few minutes later a Weasel News parody segment quietly admits nothing happened, but the security contract got renewed. It's deadpan, but it explains exactly how the system works. Steve Haynes is the perfect face of that system. He's not just an FIB agent, he's a TV host, and he cares way more about ratings than indictments. During his show The Underbelly of Paradise, he stages raids like they're episodes, dragging Michael and Trevor into over-the-top arrests because a quiet, competent operation doesn't sell ads. It's also revealed that he times busts to when the cameras are rolling, screams about terror cells, and then pockets kickbacks from the same corrupt officials he pretends to expose. Every perp is a prop. Every mission is a pilot episode. On the other side, the IA is doing the same thing, just with a different script. They're supposed to be foreign intelligence, but in reality they're constantly lobbying for more domestic authority by hyping vague international plots. You get missions where an IA contact talks about enemies abroad in the most generic way possible, as if the details don't matter, only the fear does. It's believed that their whole pitch to the government is, give us more money, or the shadowy guys you've never heard of will win. The city reacts exactly how you'd expect. NPC conversations on the street have people complaining about constant terror alerts, saying stuff like they're scared of flying, but also bored of the news. In-game websites run articles that swing between panic and parody, treating security scares like weather reports. Everyone's slightly terrified and completely numb at the same time, which is the perfect audience if you're selling protection. So when news choppers roar overhead and FIB SUVs block off entire blocks, you have to ask, are these people actually protecting San Andreas? Or just running a profitable war on fear? Because if you grab some snacks and really listen to the way they talk about budgets, ratings, and ongoing threats, it starts to sound less like law enforcement and more like a business model. And the scary part is, the next thing they decide to monetize isn't a fake sell or a staged raid. It's you, your data, and your everyday life in Los Santos, which is where the story goes next. And when your everyday life becomes a product, the people selling it eventually need muscle. Not a patrol car, not a bored cop in sunglasses. They need the guys you only see when the city decides you're officially a problem. That's where Noose comes in. Noose is the game's answer to the question, what happens when SWAT, Homeland Security, and a counter-terror unit get thrown in a blender and poured straight onto your wanted level? In GTA IV and V, they're not beat cops. They're a federal tactical response force that only really shows up once things are out of control, when the stars on your screen are less police pursuit and more domestic war zone. It's believed that Rockstar built them as the bridge between local law enforcement and full military deployment, the guys you meet right before the tanks. Visually, the game makes that shift really obvious. Regular LSPD show up in blue and white, but when Noose hits the scene, you start seeing blacked out tactical gear, heavy vests, balaclavas, and assault rifles that look like they were ordered in bulk for an overseas occupation. Their armored vans and insurgent-style trucks roll in like mobile bunkers, and their choppers don't just chase you. They hang overhead like they're pinning a target for a drone that never quite shows up. In reality, the moment you see that black Noose logo, the whole vibe changes from run from the cops to you accidentally declared war on the state. Gameplay-wise, that's the point. The escalation communicates that you've crossed an invisible line. Before, you're outrunning local patrols and maybe a helicopter. After Noose deploys, you're fighting coordinated squads that rush cover, flank you, and soak up bullets like they're getting paid per round absorbed. It also revealed how Rockstar wants you to feel that shift in your stomach. This isn't a traffic stop gone bad. This is a counter-terror response on your one-man crime spree. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how your wanted level is basically a ladder of American security culture. And that ladder is the bigger joke. GTA the 4th and V both lean into a world where domestic policing has quietly absorbed military tactics, gear, and language, all wrapped in public safety branding. Noose is dressed like soldiers but called law enforcement, which explains a lot about how the game sees the war on terror bleeding into normal city life. This would make a lot more sense in the context of the wrap-up, where Noose isn't just a background system. They're the blunt instrument thrown right into the middle of the FIB IAA feud, turning what's supposed to be a controlled meeting into a full-scale firefight. One minute it's agency blackmail, the next minute the hammer drops, and everybody on that court center terrace is suddenly on the wrong end of federal firepower, including you. And that's the thing you start to feel way before you ever learn the acronyms. The game teaches you the food chain with stars. One star is basically you annoying the neighborhood. You jacked a car in front of an officer, maybe clipped a pedestrian, and now it's just an LSPD cruiser lazily following you, siren on, like a rolling traffic ticket. The officers shout, they take pot shots, but it still feels small. Street level, if you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how forgiving that first star really is. 2 and 3 stars are where it turns into an actual police response. At 2, you get more units, better driving, more aggression, because the game is quietly telling you, okay, now this is serious. At 3, you start seeing choppers and proper roadblocks, spike strips, cruisers boxing you in. The city itself begins to rearrange around you. It's also revealed that even at this stage, you're still dealing mostly with local cops and state units, the visible part of the law that's supposed to make sense in a normal crime story. 4 stars is where that story breaks. Noose teams roll in, armored Grangers or enforcers show up, and the cops suddenly look like they've been shopping from the same catalog as Merryweather. The wanted system suggests a clean line, regular patrols, then tactical units, then federal hammers. By 5 stars, you're not in a chase anymore. You're in a war. Choppers swarm, snipers appear on rooftops, and every intersection can turn into a kill box. In reality, the game has shifted you from suspect to enemy combatant without ever saying it out loud. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a military shooter, but GTA V is about robbing banks and stealing cars, and the escalation still looks the same. The Noose guys in heavy armor, the FIB SUVs joining the mix, the way helicopters orbit you like drones over a hot zone, all of that reflects a mindset that treats crime and all the chaos you cause for fun as a battlefield. The line between soldier and cop is gone. The only difference is the badge decal on the door. Rockstar is clearly poking at real-world over-policing here. It's believed that the whole star ladder is a parody of how fast American law enforcement jumps from routine stop to full tactical response. 1 minute you bumped a cruiser, the next minute you've got a federal helicopter dumping bullets into your tailgate. So every time a noose bird spins up over Los Santos, it's not just a gameplay challenge. It's a reminder of how quickly the state reaches for its biggest guns. And it sets the stage for when those same units stop being background systems and start being your employers, your enemies, and sometimes both at once. So when those same noose birds stop chasing you for 5 stars and start circling above a peace meeting, you already know bedtime in Los Santos is about to get loud. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in terms of how fast everything falls apart at the court center. The wrap-up starts like a truce. Michael gets called out to this fancy coastal museum complex, the court center, where the FIB and IAA are supposedly going to sit down, talk, and finally bury the hatchet. It's sold to him as damage control, a chance to smooth over all the off-the-books work he's been doing for Steve Haynes and Dave Norton. Sunny weather, tourists walking around, a big glass atrium looking out over the ocean. On the surface it feels calm, which already suggests something in GTA V is about to explode. Before anyone can even pretend to cooperate, the ambush kicks in. Sniper rounds start cracking across the courtyard. Agents dive for cover, and it's revealed that multiple teams were planning to double-cross each other at the exact same time. FIB suits are suddenly firing at IAA windbreakers. IAA guys are shooting back. And then noose units begin fast-roping down, and storming the terraces like this is a live training exercise that accidentally spawned inside a field trip. In reality, you're watching 3 branches of the same government turn a negotiation into an open war zone in front of random tourists who just wanted to see some modern art. The mission is basically Rockstar drawing you a picture of federal cooperation completely collapsing. There's no foreign terrorist, no cartel hit squad, no external threat at all. Every enemy dot on your minimap is wearing some kind of badge. The architecture of the court center, all those overlapping levels and sightlines, explains the chaos really well, because you can literally see federal agents on different balconies shooting down at each other, while helicopters circle overhead, trying to decide who they're supposed to be helping. Michael sits right in the middle of that crossfire. He came here thinking he was going to talk his way out of trouble. Instead, he ends up sprinting between sculptures, dragging Dave out of cover, and sniping noose choppers just to survive the argument he helped create. It's believed that this is the moment where he fully understands he's not a secret asset or a valued informant. He's just a disposable errand boy with a nice house in Rockford Hills, and the people running him are even less in control than he is. After the wrap-up, the illusion of one unified state is gone. You've literally watched the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE try to erase each other in broad daylight, and you know every survivor is going to spend the next week fabricating reports, shredding files, and going on Weasel News to spin it as a successful joint operation. The next time someone in a suit tells Michael, Trevor, or Franklin that the government needs a favor, you already know it's just one desperate faction trying to outlast the others, and the game is about to show you how far they'll go to keep that story alive. So the funny part is, after all that chaos at courts, you never really see Los Santos panic. The city just kind of shrugs and changes the channel. That's because, by the time you'd be driving home from that mission, the spin machine is already warming up in a Weasel News van. On TV, it's not the FIB and IAA try to murder each other in a sculpture garden. It's a possible terror incident at the historic court center. Early reports are confused. Anchors are reading off half-finished teleprompters, and some guy in a blazer is standing in front of police tape saying words like cell, plot, and ongoing investigation, because that sounds way better than our agencies just had a federal slap fight with rocket launchers. If you ain't sleeping, you can almost hear the off-screen producer screaming to avoid the word friendly fire. Weasel News already has the template. They used it for the Merryweather stuff, for the airport scares, for every time a random shootout needs to become a patriotic moment. A few blurry phone clips get looped while they interview some Vinewood Hills couple who heard explosions during brunch. Then they cut to a retired news commander who explains, very calmly, that this is why we need to let our brave agencies do their job. Inside those agencies, the story gets even neater. The FIB doesn't admit it got ambushed by the IA. It's believed that they'd brief the press as if they uncovered a foreign-backed plot, maybe tied to some shadowy group the game jokes about on talk radio. The IA, being the fake CIA, leans hard into the external threat angle, because if it sounds international, it sounds important, and important gets you bigger budgets. Both sides quietly scrub their own names from the parts that went wrong, and highlight the one or two moments that can be framed as successful interdiction. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how GTA treats every disaster. The Life Invader bombing becomes a story about innovation and resilience. The constant gang wars are community issues. A blown-up research ship is spun as national security work. It's also revealed that the game's radio hosts and websites always twist things into some weird mix of fear and patriotism. So courts is just another excuse to tell viewers that freedom is under attack, and only more surveillance, more raids, and more classified operations can save them. Noose, of course, walks out looking like action heroes. On paper, they were spraying bullets at other government agents, but on Weasel News, they arrived on scene to contain a highly volatile situation. The choppers, the armored trucks, the guys in black with carbines all become B-roll for a segment about elite responders. In reality, the part where they almost mowed down half of Del Perro traffic just gets edited out. By the end of it, the actual truth of courts doesn't really matter. What matters is which agency gets the best quote on TV, who leaks the most flattering anonymous detail, who plants the right story on CNT. And the scary part is, the next mission is going to show you exactly what that kind of televised lying gives them permission to do next. So after courts, after the news choppers and the sound bites and the bodies on the grass, you kind of have to stop and zoom out for a second. Because if you ain't sleeping yet, your brain is probably already trying to connect all these missions into one big, messy picture. We've seen the FIB drag Michael out of witness protection, with that North Yankton secret hanging over his head. We've watched them stage a fake extraction in Three's company, literally kidnapping an IA asset off an IA building. Then you get Monkey Business, where the IA is running a chemical weapons scam in the ocean. And the wrap-up, where both agencies turned Del Perro into a live-fire press conference. Each of those feels like its own disaster. but together they start to look like policy. The pattern is pretty simple and pretty ugly. The FIB manufactures a crisis. The IAA manufactures a different crisis. And both sides race to solve the problem they secretly created. Criminals like Michael, Trevor, and Franklin become disposable tools because they're deniable. And deniable is better than legal. It's also revealed that whenever things get too loud, they don't fix the damage, they just change the channel. New leak, new headline, new villain. And if an operation goes bad, the first instinct isn't how do we save people, it's whose fault is this, and how do we shoot them first. This would make a lot more sense in the context of the wider GTA universe, because GTA V is not the first time you've seen this federal machine. In Liberty City, GTA RV already had Noose kicking down doors and swarming you at high wanted levels. This weird mashup of SWAT, counter-terror, and airport security that acts like a national panic button. You had FIB agents lurking around Nico's story, and the whole city is covered in ads and radio chatter about terror threats and security theater. V just takes that background noise and drags it into the main plot. The same logos, the same uniforms, but now you're inside the meetings, and you're hearing all this while you're just lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow unraveling of a fake government that feels a little too real. In reality, the FIB's fake COINTELPRO history, the IA's off-books torture, Noose helicopters showing up the second you poke the wrong building, it all starts to echo real headlines a bit too neatly. You're supposed to be relaxing, but the more the game explains, the less satire it sounds like. Grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and we're not stopping at logos and acronyms. Next, we're diving into the actual people inside these agencies. The Steve Haynes types who treat national security like a talent show. The Dave Norton types who bury guilt under paperwork. The career bureaucrats and field psychos whose personal grudges quietly rewrite policy for the whole of San Andreas. That's where the satire gets way more personal. And if you ain't sleeping yet, this is where the game quietly starts whispering at you instead of yelling. Because once you've met the Steve Haynes types, you start noticing the stuff they leave lying around. Emails, memos, half-finished PowerPoints on glowing monitors. The real horror show is written in Arial. If you walk around the FIB floors during the Bureau raid and actually stop shooting for a second, you see it. Screens open to internal emails about cost-effective enforcement solutions, spreadsheets arguing that armored SUVs are cheaper PR than wrongful death payouts, and a memo reminding agents to smile for Life Invader, because the last viral video underperformed with key demographics. It's also revealed that one of the training slides literally reframed civilian casualties as statistical noise, which explains a lot about how casually they order you into crowded spaces with a rifle. Some of the funniest stuff is background text you're not supposed to read. You'll catch an FIB incident report describing a successful joint operation that you know, from dialogue, was an absolute disaster. The wording carefully avoids saying who fired first, who got kidnapped, and who forgot to file the warrant. Instead, it suggests that all objectives were met and recommends enhanced messaging to local media. That's bureaucrat for, we blew it. But the graph still points up. The IAA's paper trail is colder. You don't get big posters, you get sterile terminals and vague references to overseas assets. During Three's company, while Michael is dangling a guy off a building, the office behind him is full of printouts about rendition flights that never quite say the word torture. They talk about expedited transfers, robust debriefing environments, and non-US airspace utilization. In reality, it's believed that these are the same black sites implied in radio talk shows and weasel news segments about missing suspects. Everybody knows what's happening. Nobody writes it down directly. Even Noose, who look like they only know how to shout and breach doors, have a whole paper ecosystem. In their briefing rooms, you'll see schedules for urban pacification drills and interagency synergy exercises with FIB and IAA observers. One training notice proudly advertises crowd control simulations at a football game, which is just a nice way of saying they practice turning a traffic stop into a small war. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how fast they appear at 4 stars. They've literally rehearsed treating the city like a live fire classroom. If you slow down and read, the joke is that these agencies are constantly cleaning up their own mess. Every memo is either asking for more budget because of a screw-up, or explaining why the screw-up was actually a strategic win. The machine generates chaos, then drowns it in PDFs, and grabs some snacks. Because the deeper you go into the files, the more you start seeing how that same mindset bleeds into the individual agents we meet next, where the paperwork stops being abstract and starts wrecking actual lives on screen. Where the paperwork stops, Trevor Phillips starts. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one when you hit the point where the federal machine accidentally invents its own worst nightmare. Trevor is basically what happens when every abuse of power, every black bag operation, and every lie about national security grows arms, legs, and a meth habit. Trevor Phillips is a career criminal and ex-military pilot with a worldview that's a mix of real history and late-night talk radio. He believes the government is lying, that agencies like the FIB and IAA run the world, and that shadow wars over oil and drugs decide who lives in a trailer and who lives in Rockford Hills. The thing is, in reality, most of what he rants about is pretty close to what the game quietly suggests is actually happening. He just reacts to it by blowing up trailers and torturing random accountants. During missions like By the Book, it's revealed that Trevor's hatred of the state doesn't stop him from cashing a government paycheck if it means chaos. Steve Haynes and Dave Norton clock him instantly as the perfect deniable asset. No records, no limits, no conscience that shows up in an oversight hearing. When they need someone to kidnap a supposed IAA asset off a skyscraper, or storm a freighter full of secret hardware, Trevor is the name they write down in their heads, but never on the forms. The FIB uses him because he's volatile enough to do what trained agents either can't or won't do on camera. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a disciplined covert unit, but what you actually see is 2 middle-aged bureaucrats dangling parole over Michael, while Trevor enthusiastically signs himself up for war crimes just to feel alive. Haynes gets his off-the-books operations, the IAA gets humiliated, and if it all goes wrong, they just point at the guy in the dirty tank top and say, "We try to stop him." Trevor isn't stupid about this. He openly insults Haynes, mocks Dave, and threatens to kill them several times, right to their faces. He knows he's being used as a disposable weapon, and he kind of enjoys it. During Three's Company, he's cracking jokes about torture and jurisdiction while dangling a man from a helicopter, like he's auditioning for his own reality show. It's believed that this is exactly why Haynes keeps him close, fear and utility wrapped in one unstable package. The irony is that Trevor's paranoid rants about surveillance, secret prisons, and fake wars are basically the mission list of GTA V. The difference is that instead of organized resistance, you get one guy turning every covert operation into a fireworks display. That makes him a problem no agency can fully control. He's too informed to be a pure puppet, too chaotic to be safely eliminated, and too effective to walk away from. And as you'll see when the turf war between FIB and IAA escalates, having Trevor on the board turns every quiet operation into a potential public disaster waiting to happen. Trevor turns every black op into a fireworks show. But the funny thing is, the quietest asset in this whole FIB IAA mess might be the guy in the Vinewood mansion, pretending he's retired. Michael DeSanta is what it looks like when witness protection comes with a swimming pool. Nice house in Rockford Hills, fake last name, a golf club membership, and a therapist who charges more per hour than most high scores. On paper, he's the success story. Former stick-up man who died in North Yankton and reappeared in Los Santos with a clean slate. In reality, that clean slate was bought with one bloody deal in a snowstorm cornfield, when Michael sold out Trevor and Brad so Dave Norton could get his big heroic bust. You see this setup right away in the therapy cutscenes. Michael's on the couch with Dr. Friedlander, rambling about stress, the family, a lot of pressure, but he never says the words FIB or witness protection. The game lets him dance around it because he's literally not allowed to be honest. His whole life is classified. He's paying a guy to help him process trauma he can't legally describe. Dave Norton is the other half of that arrangement. Washed up hero agent, stuck doing bean counter work in an office, who keeps his career alive by quietly owning Michael. It's also revealed that Dave monitors Michael's bank accounts and knows when he starts burning through cash. When Michael blows up the Life Invader CEO and suddenly has the IA sniffing around, Dave shows up. Not like a friend, but like a handler whose dog just slipped the yard. Dave uses everything as leverage. Michael's family, who think he's just a retired crook. His criminal past, which could be rediscovered at any moment. His finances, which explain why every time he tries to live normal, he's dragged into another off-the-books job like Three's Company or The Wrap-Up. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how many of Michael's missions begin with some version of, "You owe me. Remember North Yankton?" The internal conflict is the real core of his character. Michael keeps saying he's done with crime, that he wants to fix his marriage and be a better dad. But he also knows the only reason he has that marriage, that house, those kids, is because the FIB bent the rules for him. He hates the system while living in its guest room. This would make a lot more sense in the context of those therapy scenes where he complains about the government ruining his life. Without admitting he literally made himself government property. All that pressure bleeds into his home. Amanda cheats and burns through his money. Jimmy hides in his room getting high. Tracy chases Vinewood fame, and Michael's fuse gets shorter every session. When he snaps at Friedlander, when he storms out of the house, it suggests he's not just mad at them. He's furious that he can't tell anyone he's on a leash. A very long leash, sure, but it's believed that somewhere in an FIB file room is everything they need to yank it. And when the turf war with the IAA and NOOSE really heats up, that leash stops looking like protection and starts looking like a collar you might not walk away from. So while Michael's realizing that leash is actually a collar, Franklin is walking up like a stray that doesn't even know the pound exists yet. Franklin Clinton starts out as small time as it gets. He's a repo guy for Simeon, boosting cars on bogus credit deals, doing little hustles with Lamar, arguing with Denise about groceries and respect. He's worried about getting shot by Ballas on the corner, not about ending up on some FIB terror watch list. In reality, the closest he gets to the government at first is when a cop shows up to yell about a tow truck blocking traffic. That changes the second he kicks in Michael's window in Rockford Hills. You watch this moment, and it's also revealed that Franklin isn't just stealing a car. He's accidentally breaking into witness protection. Michael sees a younger version of himself and decides to mentor him. And that's where the federal politics start creeping in from the edges, way before Franklin knows any names like Dave Norton or Steve Haynes. At first, Michael is just teaching him bigger scores. The jewelry store job, the planning sessions with Lester, the talk about crews and exits, and clean money. Franklin goes from repo lots to casing Vangelico. And it feels like a normal criminal level up to him because he doesn't see the strings attached to Michael yet. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what you know about Michael's FIB deal. But Franklin's not in that loop. He just sees an old head who finally knows what he's doing. Then the rescue on the IA building happens. Three's Company. Suddenly Franklin is on a chopper, sniping at NOOSE and IA guys, hauling some tortured accountant off a skyscraper while Haynes screams in his earpiece. And Franklin's reaction is very different from Michael's. Michael is locked in with Dave and Haynes because of his past. Franklin's like, who are these people? And why are we helping them? You get little lines that explain his whole mindset. After missions, Franklin will say stuff like, man, why are we listening to these fools? Or question why they trust some FIB clown who clearly doesn't care if they live. He doesn't have history with North Yankton. He never begged for a deal, so he can see the absurdity clearer. To him, government agents are just another gang with better suits and more helicopters. Pattern interrupt for you. Franklin is actually the most normal person in this mess. If you ain't sleeping, think about it. He starts as the average citizen who isn't on any federal radar, just trying to get out of Strawberry. But the second he steps into Michael's world, the FIB, IA turf war, and NOOSE response teams become part of his daily life, from raids in the desert to shootouts in movie studios. By the time the big agency showdown comes, it's believed that Franklin understands something the others forgot. Once you're in their game, you don't get to choose the rules, only which side you're willing to betray next. So by the time you get to the FIB heist, Franklin's figured out the rules, but Michael's the one who has to walk into the lion's den. Literally, you're not robbing a bank or a jewelry store anymore. You're robbing the federal building, on orders from the people who run it. The setup is simple and insane at the same time. Steve Haynes and Dave Norton have incriminating files in FIB archives, tying them to North Yankton, off-the-books hits, and all the dirty laundry they've been hanging on Michael for years. Auditors and rival agencies are circling, and it's believed that if those files see daylight, Haynes goes down, Dave goes down, and Michael's witness protection fairy tale goes with them. So their solution is to make Michael and his crew hit the FIB itself, just to burn the evidence before anyone honest can read it. You get two approaches, the covert fire crew infiltration and the loud rooftop assault. Both are basically personality tests for how you want to humiliate the FIB. If you pick the fire route, you're cosplaying as first responders. Michael and Franklin steal a fire truck, suit up, and roll right into the tower during a staged blaze that Lester triggers with a chemical bomb in the ventilation. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a normal heist, but here it reveals something about the agency. The only thing that gets unquestioned access to every floor is emergency services. No biometric scans, no deep background, just a clipboard and a helmet. It quietly suggests that the FIB has built a fortress against terrorists and spies, but not against a guy with a hose and a duffel bag. The roof approach is the opposite. You go in with rappel gear, heavy weapons, and you treat the FIB like a hostile target. NOOSE team swarm, chopper circle, the building goes into full lockdown. In reality, this shows you the other side of their security. Once they know they're under attack, the response is overwhelming, chaotic, and way more about firepower than control. It's also revealed that for all the glass and steel, the real vulnerability is panic. Agents are screaming, alarms are blaring, and you're still walking out with the drive. During the planning, Haynes keeps talking about oversight and the suits in Washington breathing down his neck. He rants about internal investigations, about how the IA would love to hang him, and how they need to clean house before the auditors arrive. Dave plays it softer, but even he admits they have to sanitize the files so nobody can trace what really happened in Ludendorff. Nobody's asking who committed the crimes. They're asking who controls the paper trail. And that's the irony. You're not exposing federal corruption. You're the janitor. The criminals are cleaning up the mess for the feds, not because of justice, but because the system is so compromised it can't risk policing itself. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and the next jobs only dig that hole deeper. So when you're torching the FIB archives, you're not just burning Dave's performance review. You're walking through the hard drive of the American security state with a gas can. That building is basically one big memory. Every floor is a different kind of secret. You've got case files on organized crime, terrorism, political corruption, all the stuff they brag about on CNT. But next to that, you also have surveillance logs, raw wiretap transcripts, and those creepy pattern of life reports that explain why the FIB knows where everyone in Los Santos buys their coffee. It's believed that buried in those servers are years of Stingray pools, Life Invader metadata, and camera feeds from half the city. Then you've got the stuff they don't brag about. Internal investigations that never quite finish. Misconduct reports that go missing. Signed authorizations for black ops that technically don't exist. The kind of memos that say, in very careful language, that some poor idiot from Sandy Shores was collateral damage and everyone involved is cleared. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and the paper trail is the only thing separating mistake from crime. When you blow that up, you're not just saving Dave Norton and Steve Haynes, you're protecting the whole ecosystem around them. Every off-the-books rendition like the one in Three's Company. Every illegal torture session with Mr. K. Every fake terror plot they quietly helped set up so they could heroically stop it later. The raid wipes, the approvals, the emails, the tasking orders. It also revealed, in a sideways way, that their war with the IA is fought as much on hard drives as with guns. Think about North Yankton. That botched 2004 robbery is on some FIB server as an asset recruitment success. With Michael's deal, Brad's death, and Trevor's escape all turned into bullet points. Monkey business, the nerve gas job with the IA, is probably logged as a joint counterterrorism exercise, not two agencies playing keep away with the war crime in a can. Burning the archive suggests that every time these people broke the law, somebody filed it as a win. In reality, this mirrors real scandals. The CIA destroyed torture tapes. Police departments lose body cam footage. Governments wipe email servers right before hearings. Los Santos just lets you be the guy carrying the incendiaries. After the raid, the truth doesn't die because nobody knows it. It dies because nobody can prove it. The witnesses are either dead, paid, or terrified. And now the files are ash. That's plausible deniability as game design. And the really fun part is what they don't burn. The stuff they keep locked up far away from downtown. The stuff they keep locked up far away from downtown. That's where Noose comes in. You see them first as little icons on the minimap. But on the ground, they're basically the state saying, okay, playtime's over. Noose ground units roll up in heavy armor, ballistic helmets, and plate carriers that look like they were bought with 10 different emergency budgets. They carry carbine rifles as their default, not pistols. And they move like they've drilled this exact street corner 100 times during training. Regular LSPDE officers panic and spray shots. Noose stacks on doors. In missions like the wrap-up, you can watch how they flow through the plaza in waves, using the FIB building's concrete and planters like a live fire obstacle course. They push up in 2- and 3-man elements, one guy laying down fire while the others advance, and when they breach, they don't knock. They just blow hinges, pour in, and assume everyone inside is guilty until respawn. Their AI behavior quietly sells that difference. Cops stand in the open, shout, then die. Noose actually flanks you, wrapping around stairwells and side alleys because the game wants you to feel boxed in. They hug cover, lean out with disciplined bursts, and keep walking forward even when you're mowing them down. That relentless pressure is what makes 5 stars feel like a siege instead of a chase. If you ain't sleeping, you'll notice they almost never fully retreat. They just reset, reposition, and come again. The vehicles change everything too. When the black armored vans and tactical SUVs show up, chases stop being about outrunning sirens and start being about breaking a perimeter. Those Noose cruisers and Grangers soak up rifle fire, and they're often parked to block intersections, which explains why your clever escape route suddenly turns into a funnel of gunfire. During high wanted levels, they'll leap out of side doors in full kit, using the vehicle itself as rolling cover, turning an ordinary traffic stop into urban warfare. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how the game treats serious crime. Once you hit that threshold with a bank robbery, a police massacre, or an airport rampage, the state doesn't frame it as crime anymore. It's treated like an insurgency. Noose is the counter-insurgency answer, justified as homeland security in reality, but functionally just overwhelming force, dropped onto whatever neighborhood you're in. It's also revealed that for normal citizens of Los Santos, seeing Noose roll in means the script has flipped. There's no more bargaining, no more corrupt cop you can bribe, no more smooth FIB agent pretending this is an investigation. It's pure suppression now. Streets get locked down, news choppers spin it as a terror incident, and the only story that survives is that the government responded decisively. And if that's how they treat one rooftop shootout you caused by accident, imagine what it looks like when FIB and IA start using Noose as their private chess piece in their little shadow war. And when the FIB and IA start playing chess, the first piece they move is almost always the one you hear before you see, that Noose helicopter overhead. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and you can probably hear the rotors in your head already. In reality, the game makes sure you never forget that sound. You're tearing down a freeway or cutting through back alleys, and then it fades in, that low, angry thump of blades, getting closer, echoing off the Maze Bank Tower and the hills. Before you can even spot it, the city around you starts reacting. Sirens stack up, pedestrians panic, and then the sky just opens a wide eye on you. The spotlight is the real star here. 1 second it's dark, the next you're washed out in blinding light, like some busted celebrity on Weasel News. It's believed that once that beam locks onto you at higher wanted levels, you feel the state's hand get a lot heavier. The pilot tracks your turns almost perfectly. The gunner rakes the street with bursts, and you get those bright yellow tracers stitching the asphalt around your tires. Even when you duck under bridges or weave through construction sites, that light keeps swinging back, cutting through gaps, reminding you that hiding is only temporary. What this really does is extend the reach of the whole system. On the ground, you can lose cops with smart turns, alleys, or just going off-road. Once the Noose chopper is up, it's like the map itself is against you. You see it in missions like the wrap-up, when the plaza turns into a crossfire and that helicopter floats above it all, calmly circling while everyone on the ground dies for some interagency ego trip. The message is simple: cross a certain line, and the sky gets deputized. Rockstar leans hard into lighting to sell that feeling. During night chases, the beam slices through smog, catches dust around you, and makes your car feel like a stage prop. It's also revealed that in some heists and set pieces, flares and tracer fire turn the whole scene into this chaotic light show. Red flares on rooftops, white searchlights swinging, orange muzzle flashes from the door gunner. It looks cool, but it also explains how the game wants you to feel, not like you're in a fair fight, but like you're being lit up for execution. And that ties into a bigger idea the game keeps hinting at. The Noose chopper is just the loud, obvious version of something that's always there. Radio shows and websites talk about drones, spy planes, invisible surveillance grids. It suggests that the sky itself belongs to the security state, and you're just borrowing space under it. The helicopter is the moment that paranoia becomes visible, when all that quiet tracking turns into literal gunfire. By the time you've seen enough of them, the silhouette of a Noose chopper becomes its own kind of warning label. Once you're on a list in GTA's world, You're never truly out of sight. You're just waiting for the rotors to spin up again in the distance. And that constant hum of rotors in the distance is only the loud part of the surveillance state. Most of the time in Los Santos, the spying is quiet, petty, and kind of played off as a joke, which is exactly what makes it feel normal. You get it early with the phone calls and radio. Talk radio hosts casually mention that every call is recorded for training and national security purposes, and nobody even reacts. Commercials joke about how your smartphone is always listening, but the punchline is that you should buy the newer, even more invasive model. It's believed that this is Rockstar's way of pointing at real-world wiretapping and Prism-style programs while pretending it's just late-night comedy. Life Invader is the clearest example. Jay Norris brags on TV that privacy is dead and that the company sells user data to the government. The Life Invader website constantly asks for permissions, tracks your every click, and fills your feed with ads that feel a little too targeted. In reality, it's basically Facebook, Google, and every tech giant rolled into one. And the game strongly suggests that the FIB and IA either have a backdoor or don't even need one, because Life Invader hands everything over. During Lester's missions, it's also revealed that he can scrape Life Invader to build detailed profiles on targets, which explains how easy it is for actual agencies to do the same thing with real resources. You see fake search engines like Bleeder and iFind, and their terms of service openly say your data can be shared with relevant authorities. It's deadpan, but it's also a warning. Everybody clicked accept, so now everybody's on file. If you ain't sleeping yet, the radio makes it worse. Shows mock paranoid callers who complain about drones and tracking chips while the hosts laugh and cut to an ad for a GPS-enabled ankle monitor marketed as a lifestyle accessory. Conspiracy sites in-game rant about FIB satellites and IA mind control, and the twist is that, in this world, they're only slightly exaggerating. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how the agencies talk in missions. You never tour a giant NSA-style data farm, but the dialogue fills in the blanks. FIB agents pull up call logs, travel history, and financial records in seconds. Devin Weston casually references intelligence reports on protesters. Even news shows up like an automated response system once your wanted level hits a certain threshold, as if some database just flipped you from citizen to domestic threat. And if they know this much about everyone, how many people are getting the Michael treatment without you ever seeing it? Quiet visits, sealed files, a little blackmail about an old search history, and suddenly a regular guy is running deniable ops for an agency that doesn't officially know his name. Grab some snacks, because the next part digs into who's pulling those strings and what happens when the puppets start pulling back. And the way those strings get pulled is almost never in a briefing room. It's on your couch, in your car, playing in the background while you're not really listening. The FIB and IAA don't just lean on guys like Michael. They lean on the whole city's attention span. Steve Haynes is the clearest example. On TV, he's this smug, tanned host of the underbelly of paradise, walking you through staged busts and pre-approved raids like he's doing public service. In reality, he's an FIB agent using a reality show to sell his version of crime and terror. When you watch him in missions, it's revealed that half the operations he films are set up just to make him look heroic, even when innocent people are getting shot off camera because it plays better for ratings. This show constantly suggests that Los Santos is one traffic stop away from total collapse, that terrorists, drug dealers, and foreign agents are literally everywhere. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a city that actually felt that dangerous, but you know from playing that most people are just stuck in traffic or arguing on their phones. Haynes needs a scared audience, Because a scared audience doesn't ask why the FIB is torturing random guys in a warehouse or blowing up a lab they secretly helped fund. If you ain't sleeping, listen to the talk radio while you drive. You get these hosts ranting about security, immigrants, and the war at home, repeating agency talking points almost word for word. One host panics about border threats, another screams about homegrown radicals, and it's believed that a lot of their sources are just unnamed law enforcement insiders, feeding them exaggerated leaks. The more they yell, the more it explains why people accept news teams rappelling down on a guy who stole a sedan. Then you've got Weasel News. Every time something happens, they frame it in a way that justifies more policing and surveillance. A shootout downtown becomes proof that the city needs heavier militarization. A small protest is covered like an insurgency. They rarely question official stories, and when they do, it's just to ask if the agencies are being too soft. You raid the FIB building, blow up an IA lab, and Weasel still treats it as brave agents fighting chaos, like the agencies didn't start half the chaos themselves. Here's the pattern interrupt. Rockstar makes all of this ridiculous on purpose. The hosts are over the top. The segments are absurd, and the fear-mongering is so constant it stops sounding real. That's the satire. It's also revealed that this cartoonish media landscape is a mirror of how real news and talk shows can drift into being mouthpieces for security agencies. By the time you've heard enough of it, you can't easily tell where genuine danger ends and manufactured fear begins. And that confusion is useful, because when people are that scared and that distracted, the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE can run their secret wars in plain sight, while everyone at home argues about the headlines. Grab some snacks, because next we're going into how those secret wars actually play out behind the cameras. Those secret wars don't stay secret for the people standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. You see it most clearly in missions like the Wrap-Up, where the game quietly turns a federal pissing contest into a massacre at a public landmark. You walk into the court center expecting a sketchy meeting, and suddenly the whole place turns into a live fire theme park. Tourists are screaming, museum staff are ducking behind planters, and NOOSE is fast-roping in like it's a training exercise. The FIB, the IA, and NOOSE are all trying to shoot each other, but the bullets go through whoever's between them. The way the camera frames it, those civilians are just moving cover. The mission wants you focused on snipers and helicopters, not the random guy in cargo shorts who came to see some art and got turned into debris. That same attitude runs through how the game treats low-level agents and cops. Every raid, every shootout, you're mowing down squads of NOOSE officers and FIB grunts who are basically nameless uniforms. Their own leadership treats them the same way. Steve Haynes and Andrea Sanchez talk about resources and assets during briefings, but what that really means is a pile of guys in vests who are paid to die so someone higher up can win an argument. It's believed that most of these operations are off the books anyway, which explains why nobody's writing sympathy tweets about the 50 dudes left on the tarmac at the end of Monkey Business. Then you've got someone like Ferdinand Karimov. He's technically important, because he's the bargaining chip that lets the FIB and IA blackmail each other. But as a person, he's basically luggage. The FIB pretends he's dead, the IA wants him alive, and Michael and Trevor are just the delivery service. Karimov spends the whole thing hooded, strapped to a chair, tortured, shipped around, and the story never slows down to ask if he has rights or a life outside that warehouse. It's also revealed that the big moral question isn't should we do this, it's which agency gets to own the body. Kita's dark humor makes all of this feel weirdly trivial on purpose. You get extra cash for headshots, you hear NPCs crack one-liners as they die, and the radio makes jokes about terrorism stats while you're literally causing them. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how the satire works. the game keeps shrugging at collateral damage because that's exactly what its fake security state does. In reality, the scariest part isn't the shootouts you see, it's the stuff you don't. How many people lose jobs, families, or their sanity because they popped up in the wrong surveillance search, got blackmailed over a private message, or landed on some FIB watch list by mistake? This would make a lot more sense in the context of what these agencies are actually doing with all that data, which is where we're going next. So when you zoom out from all that data harvesting, you hit the next weird question. Are the threats they're chasing even real? Or are they just really expensive ghost stories with better branding? GTV quietly keeps poking you with that idea if you ain't sleeping during the background noise. On talk radio, you get hosts bragging about foiled plots that sound suspiciously vague, while callers complain that every week the FIB announces another bust right before a budget vote. Weasel News runs breathless segments about shadowy foreign extremists right next to ads for noose recruitment, and satire sites like the Onion-style local news joke that if crime ever stopped, the agencies would have to start it back up just to keep the lights on. It's believed that a lot of those headlines you see on in-game websites are less about informing the public and more about selling the idea that danger is everywhere, all the time. When you actually play the missions, the enemies you're supposed to fear barely exist as people. In Three's Company, you kidnap a supposed IA asset from the IA themselves. He's described as a terrorist contact, but he mostly just screams, gets waterboarded, and then disappears from the story. And by the book, the guy you torture is accused of being connected to some cell, but it's also revealed that the intel was garbage, and the target was picked off a photograph. The supposed mastermind he points you to is just a random dude at the docks who never even pulls a weapon. These people feel less like villains and more like props the script needs so Steve Haynes can look important. The way the game keeps everything vague really explains what Rockstar is doing. You hear about the agency, foreign interests, rogue states, domestic extremists, but you never get a clear manifesto. No concrete group with goals beyond the words terror and threat. This would make a lot more sense in the context of real-world criticism of open-ended wars on terror, where the enemy is always out there somewhere, just fuzzy enough that the mission never ends and the funding never stops. So you start to wonder how many raids, arrests, and black bag jobs in Los Santos are built on the same kind of flimsy intel you see in the story. If Michael gets dragged into a skyscraper extraction because some analyst misread a phone call, how many nobodies in Mirror Park get their door kicked in because they searched the wrong thing on iFind? In reality, the game suggests that for every plot you stop, 10 more are probably just fabricated, exaggerated, or straight up staged so that the FIB can beat the IA in their little numbers game. And if half the enemies are imaginary, that leaves you with one last question. Who's actually more dangerous to Los Santos? The nameless terrorists you never meet, or the guys in suits and tactical gear chasing phantoms? Keep that in mind, because next we're going into what those phantoms let them get away with. So let's hit a pattern break for a second. Grab some snacks, because this is a long one in your head. What if the whole thing never started? What if Michael either dies in that snow in North Yankton, or he looks Dave Norton in the eyes and just says no to the deal? In reality, that one moment is the spine of all the federal chaos in GTV. If Michael actually bleeds out next to Brad, Dave doesn't get his hero cop photo op. No big bust, no promotion, no shiny transfer to the FIB's Los Santos office. He's just a small-time agent who showed up to a robbery and watched it go sideways. That kind of failure doesn't get buried. It's believed that internal affairs would start sniffing around, because even in this universe, 3 dead bodies and a blown sting look bad on paper. If Michael survives but refuses the witness protection deal, it's almost worse for Dave. Now he has a living witness who knows he tried to cut a secret arrangement. Dave can't parade Michael's death around to climb the ladder, and he also can't control him. That suggests a very different career path, stuck in some boring field office, or quietly pushed out before he drags the bureau into a scandal. And without that dirty deal, the FIB IAA feud looks different too. You don't have Michael as a deniable asset for Three's company. No middle-aged guy in a suit who can be dressed up as a fake agent and thrown out of a chopper. Those off-the-books missions where Steve, Haynes, and Dave use Michael and Trevor to kidnap or sabotage IAA targets just don't happen. Because they don't have a pliable, dead-on-paper bank robber to burn. The turf war still exists, but it stays inside memos, budget meetings, and passive-aggressive press leaks instead of freeway shootouts and noose teams hanging off helicopters. Trevor's path gets a lot darker too. Without the illusion that Michael betrayed him then secretly lived in Los Santos, Trevor either dies in North Yankton or spends years spiraling with no one to blame but the system. If you ain't sleeping, imagine Trevor Phillips with zero emotional leash, no fantasy of revenge to chase, just pure directionless violence. His targets probably shift from the O'Neills and Aztecas to more direct hits on cops, FIB field offices, maybe even noose convoys, because he's got nothing left to lose and no old friend to hunt. And that's the point of this little thought experiment. One tired thief saying okay to one desperate agent quietly explains why you end up storming government buildings, torturing suspects, and watching noose crash through skylights over a numbers game between two fake counter-terror agencies. Take that deal away, and the whole house of cards falls in a very different direction. Which raises a weird question. Is this timeline actually safer, or just less honest about how broken everyone is? If you ain't sleeping, this is where it gets kind of funny and kind of terrifying at the same time. Because once you ask if the timeline is safer, you bump straight into the people who are supposedly making it safe. Internal affairs, auditors, and oversight committees that keep getting name-dropped like urban legends. You hear it in throwaway lines. FIB agents grumble about internal investigations, IA guys complain about the committee, and radio hosts talk about blue ribbon panels looking into abuse. On paper, the FIB has its own internal affairs division. The IA gets watched by some shadowy intelligence committee, and Noose is supposedly under federal review every time they turn downtown into a war zone. It's also revealed that even the Life Invader mess and the Merryweather stuff generate talk of hearings and inquiries. On the surface, it all suggests a system where someone, somewhere, is checking the homework. In reality, the only time you feel those bodies matter is when a character like Dave Norton starts panicking. Dave isn't scared that oversight is going to clean up the FIB. He's scared it's going to dig up his deal with Michael, the North Yankton cover-up, and all the off-the-books operations you've been running during the story. When he begs Michael to help him in the wrap-up, it's believed that he's less worried about the agency's reputation and more about not getting paraded in front of a committee with his emails on a projector. Same thing with Steve Haynes. He constantly references investigations into the IA, budget hearings, and who's going to get blamed for which fake terror plot. He weaponizes the threat of oversight, using it as leverage in the FIB, IA turf war. But you never see him actually fear that a victim of torture or a framed suspect is going to get justice. He only panics when his TV image and his career are on the line. And you, as the player, never once run a mission where genuine reformers win. There's no storyline where a whistleblower survives. No quest where an honest inspector general forces the FIB to stand down. No heist where you're stealing documents to hand to a real journalist who actually publishes. Anytime you steal files, like from the IA and Three's company or the FIB building later, those documents just become another bargaining chip in the same corrupt game. So a lot of what gets called internal affairs feels like theater. Selective enforcement. The same way Noose shows up hard on some low-level crook, while Vinewood celebrities walk, the oversight stuff is used to slap down the wrong kind of corrupt, while the right kind of corrupt gets promoted. Committees investigate when someone loses a power struggle, not when citizens lose their rights. That's the joke Rockstar keeps running. Oversight exists, but mostly as another weapon. Not a shield for the public, just a slightly fancier gun in the cabinet. And if you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this would make a lot more sense in the context of how these agencies were built in the first place, and who they were really designed to protect. So to get to that, you have to start way earlier, before the black SUVs and the torture flights, back when these people still thought they were the good guys. When you walk into the FIB building in downtown LS, or you raid the IAA facility in Three's Company, all the nameless agents kind of blur together. Same haircut, same suits, same tactical vests. It's like the game is quietly telling you there's a production line somewhere, cranking out federal action figures with different voice packs. The look suggests a pipeline. Law schools feeding the white-collar analysts, ex-military and SWAT cops feeding the field teams, all sanded down until nobody stands out unless the script needs them to. You hear it in their throwaway lines. During firefights, they yell about not having done this since the academy, or complain that this isn't what we trained for. That tiny bit of dialogue is doing a lot of work. It's believed that these people spent months shooting paper targets, running obstacle courses, and sitting through lectures on national security that basically explain why the rules don't really apply to them. By the time you meet them, they've already internalized that the badge is a cheat code. It's also revealed that the agencies don't stay in their own lanes. Noose is supposed to be the heavy tactical arm, but their presence in GTA V feels like they live at the range. You see their name on trucks, on choppers, on riot armor, and radio chatter suggests constant drills and joint exercises with FIB and EA teams. In reality, if you've got a unit that only shows up at 4 stars and above, that implies they're training every day for maximum overkill. Kick in doors, secure rooftops, shoot first, file reports never. The psychology behind that is where it gets darker. The game never shows you a recruitment office, but the behavior you see in missions like Monkey Business or the wrap-up suggests what they're screening for. You want people obedient enough to follow insane orders, ambitious enough to justify it to themselves, and flexible enough to bend every law on the books as long as someone higher up signs the email. When an FIB guy casually orders you to kidnap a foreign national off an EA convoy, nobody on his team even blinks. That's not an accident. That's conditioning. So every Steve Haynes and Dave Norton starts as a pretty normal resume. Maybe a cop who shot well at the range. Maybe a soldier who did one tour too many. Maybe a grad who wrote a thesis on counterterrorism. After a few years in the machine, they're not people with jobs anymore. They're instruments pointed at whatever the state is currently scared of. And if you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks. Because the next part is who's actually holding those instruments and how they turn that fear into missions, budgets, and bodies. So when we talk about who's holding those instruments, you kind of have to rewind to Liberty City, because GTA IV is where Rockstar really starts stress testing federal power. You don't get named FIB or EA handlers yet, but you do get Noose. And they're basically the face of the American security state anytime your wanted level gets too loud. In IV, Noose shows up like a sledgehammer. You see them in raids, like the big charge on the Bank of Liberty heist, and in those stairwell gunfights where they stack up with shields, shotguns, and that heavy breathing through gas masks. At 4 stars, they're rolling up in cruisers and enforcers. At 6, they're rappelling from choppers. And the game frames it as serious. Liberty City is wet sidewalks, drunk pedestrians, and this grounded post-9/11 vibe where a Noose team smashing through a door actually feels like something you might see on the news. The logo is already doing work. Big eagle, bold federal lettering, that same blue and gold color language you later see on FIB jackets and IAA seals. It quietly suggests that even if you're changing coasts, you're still under one national security umbrella. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar builds universes. They want you to feel like Noose and Broker and Noose and Los Santos are answering to the same paranoid bosses. By the time you hit G to V, they finally pull the curtain back. Noose is still around in wanted level responses and on the side of Grangers and Predators. But now you also have explicit factions, the FIB and the IAA. Instead of just an armored battering ram, the federal apparatus becomes a whole food chain. You raid the IAA building in Three's company, you storm the FIB lot in the Bureau raid, and it's also revealed that half of those counter-terror ops are just turf wars between agencies trying to one-up each other. The acronyms start piling up. FIB for FBI, IAA for CIA, NOOSE as this DHS/SWAT hybrid, all sharing fonts, eagles, and slogans about freedom that clash with what you're actually doing. In reality, most of your patriotic missions are about kidnapping one guy, blowing up another guy's lab, or cleaning up evidence from some previous screw-up. The continuity from IV is the hardware and the branding. The escalation in V is that you finally see the boardroom side of the violence. The tone shifts hard too. Jita of Firth treats Noose like a grim inevitability. You push the state too far. It crushes you. Jita V treats the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE like rival YouTubers with tanks. Steve Haynes turns counter-terror briefings into reality TV. Devin Weston buys influence like it's Dielk, and the agencies are scary because they're incompetent and self-serving on a national scale. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because the next part is how that incompetence almost breaks the whole country, and who quietly profits when it does. And the way they almost break the country is by declaring war on basically everything. In San Andreas, the war on drugs and the war on terror are the same subscription package, just with different loading screens and slightly different helmets. The game constantly treats them as interchangeable excuses. 1 minute, Steve Haynes is screaming about national security on his TV show. The next, he's sending Michael and Franklin to kick down doors in South Los Santos for a glorified drug raid that somehow needs a helicopter, snipers, and a full media crew. It's believed that if you say terror enough times on Weasel News, you can bill any overtime you want. You hear it in the dialogue. Talk radio hosts casually jump from urban gang violence to foreign extremists to dangerous protest movements like they're reading one shopping list. During the Mission 3's company, Haynes calls the IAA suspect a terrorist, but his lines also suggest he barely knows what the guy actually did. To him, he's just a prop to prove the FIB is tough on crime, tough on terror, tough on everything. That's the joke. Gangs, foreign enemies, and activists all get melted into one big blurry threat. Outside the FIB building, pedestrians complain about surveillance at the same time radio callers demand more crackdowns on those people downtown with signs. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a normal democracy, but in reality the game is showing you how easy it is to sell fear when the categories are deliberately vague. The FIB and IAA live in that blur. The IAA is supposed to be foreign intel, but it's also revealed that they run black sites right off the coast and meddle in corporate espionage, tech companies, and even chemical weapons research. The FIB is supposed to be domestic, but they're flying you out to offshore labs in monkey business, raiding cargo ships, and micromanaging street-level meth and weed operations like microtransactions. Missions constantly mix drug busts, terror plots, and organized crime into one stew. In Blitz play, the war on drugs is the excuse to hijack a government cash transfer that's really about FIB versus IAA funding. In the wrap-up, a supposed counter-terror meeting at Court Center turns into a shootout between FIB, IAA, Merriweather, and NOOSE, with Michael caught in the middle while snipers and choppers swarm like it's Black Friday at Amu Nation. Here's the pattern interrupt. The real war isn't on drugs or terror at all. Ita's satire suggests the real war is against unpredictability itself. Anything that threatens the illusion of control gets labeled a crisis. Trevor's chaos, activist marches, low-level dealers, rival agencies, even whistleblowers like Susan Mendez in the FIB files, all get treated as the same kind of problem, something messy that might embarrass the people in charge. So the wars never end. They just get rebranded. And in the next part, you'll see how that endless emergency mindset shapes everything from Vinewood propaganda to how your wanted level works. So when that endless emergency mindset meets organized crime, you start to see how weird Los Santos really is. Because the FIB, the IAA and NOOSE don't just fight gangs and cartels, they also manage them, redirect them, and occasionally hire them. You see this most clearly when Michael's crew gets turned into a freelance hit squad. In Three's company, Steve Haynes forces Michael, Trevor, and Franklin to kidnap Ferdinand Karimov from the IAA, but the cover story is that they're stopping a dangerous foreign asset. Later, in the wrap-up and cleaning out the bureau, the same pattern repeats. The FIB leans on Michael to hit specific targets, like Devin Weston's enemies or IAA-linked operatives, and dresses it up as national security instead of what it really is, which is agency office politics with assault rifles. It's also revealed that some of these terrorists and cartel guys are basically props. The Mission Monkey business has the IAA using Michael and Trevor to steal a nerve agent from a government facility, then staging it as a heroic counter-terror op. Dialogue during the mission suggests the supposed terror cell doesn't even exist. You're not saving the city, you're helping one agency win a PowerPoint war in Washington. At the same time, the street-level gangs aren't just random targets. It's believed that some Vagos and Ballast crews have quiet understandings with federal handlers. You get little hints. Ballast showing up with surprisingly heavy hardware, cartel-connected guys like Javier Madrazo doing business without constant raids, or dealers bragging on Weasel News about plea deals that sound way too generous. This would make a lot more sense in the context of classic Coinopro-style setups, where the agency protects certain informants while feeding their rivals to NOOSE. NOOSE itself is where the performance really kicks in. When you hit 4 or 5 stars and see NOOSE trucks and choppers, it's framed as this huge anti-gang or anti-terror response. But in reality, a lot of their big moments are about assets and optics. Raids on stash houses are less about cleaning up the neighborhood and more about seizing cash, weapons and property that can be turned into budget justifications. You blow up half of South Los Santos, and the next day a spokesperson is on CN talking about measurable progress against organized crime. The line between law enforcement and organized crime gets even blurrier when you look at methods. The FIB extorts Michael by threatening his family. The IAA blackmails Trevor with his own rap sheet. And both agencies use torture, kidnapping, and illegal surveillance as standard tools. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks. Because once you notice it, the pattern is everywhere. They run protection rackets with badges instead of colors. By the time you've watched Steve Haynes stage-manage executions on live TV and seen NOOSE storm buildings for cameras, the difference between a cartel boss and a federal director in Los Santos really comes down to branding, PR, and who gets their budget approved next year. And out on the street, you see what that branding does to people who don't even have a wanted level. You're just walking past a hot dog stand and some NPC is saying, "The government's hiding the truth about the assassinations." Like that's just casual small talk about the weather. Los Santos civilians are basically running a 24/7 conspiracy podcast in the background. You'll hear a guy on his phone whisper, "I know they're listening, man. They're always listening," before he loudly orders a cab and gives his exact address. Another pedestrian, complains that the FIB is tapping all our phones to stop terrorists, and then immediately pivots into asking if you've seen the latest celebrity scandal, which kind of explains how the game sees distraction working. Radio callers talk about being on a list because they Googled the wrong thing. Life Invader workers joke about the FIB camping their servers, and it's believed that half the city assumes every text is being mirrored in some ugly government office. The jokes are constant. A Vinewood hipster mutters, "Don't talk so loud, dude." The IA has drones, while standing under a security camera. Airport NPCs complain that security made them take their shoes off to stop a guy with a bottle of water. And one businessman grumbles that he's been randomly selected for the 5th time this month. In reality, the humor is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Everyone treats being searched, scanned, and profiled like it's just part of the commute. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how many throwaway lines are about surveillance, not crime. Satire shows up in the way they talk about airports and checkpoints like badly run theme parks. You'll hear, "They took my shampoo but let some dude on with a duffel bag," or a tourist complaining that Noose made him unpack everything so they could confiscate nail clippers and ignore the screaming drunk behind him. The game keeps suggesting that all this theater never actually catches real threats. It just creates jobs, budgets, and a sense that someone, somewhere, is in control. Underneath the jokes, there's this quiet resignation. NPCs say things like, "What are you gonna do? You fight the FIB, you disappear," or "They're all corrupt, bro. Just don't get noticed." People know the system is rigged, know the agencies are dirty, but they've downgraded their rebellion into sarcasm and eye rolls. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what you've seen in the main story. Torture on TV, fake terror plots, agents killing other agents, and the city just going to work the next day. Grab some snacks, because this background paranoia is the emotional backdrop to every FIB, IAA, and NOOSE op you run. The population is too tired, too scared, or too distracted to push back in any meaningful way, which is exactly the kind of environment where federal power can do its worst. And the really fun part is who steps into that vacuum next. And the really fun part is who steps into that vacuum next. Because the game literally hands that choice to you at the end. Franklin Clinton is basically told to pick a flavor of state violence. Ending A. He kills Trevor for the FIB, cleaning up a loose cannon so the borough can keep the files buried. Ending B. He kills Michael, which quietly rewards Devin Weston and the corporate side of the machine. Or ending C. The so-called death wish, where Franklin says no to both options and teams up with Michael and Trevor to go after everybody at once. On paper, ending C feels like you finally fighting back. You drive to Lamar, you rally the squad, and you set up this massive ambush at the foundry. FIB guys, IAA guys, Merryweather, private security. It's believed that almost every flavor of armed goon you've met in the story shows up in one giant meat grinder. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a happy ending, but GTA V plays it like a last stand that just happens to work. After the foundry, Franklin, Michael, and Trevor make a kill list. Stretch, Chang Jr., Devin Weston, and most importantly, Steve Haynes. The targets are not random. Every name is tied to a different pillar of power, gangs, foreign capital, corporate money, and the federal state. Going after Haynes especially is like trying to stab the rotten core of the system, not just the fruit. Haynes is a corrupt FIB agent and part-time TV personality, and the game makes you kill him during a live shoot of his show. He's on the Del Perro Pier, doing this fake tough and crime segment, yelling at the camera about law and order, and you just snipe him mid-take. His blood literally splashes across the same screen he's been using as propaganda. In reality, that's Rockstar taking the war on terror TV cop and turning his own platform into a firing squad. If you ain't sleeping by now, that's your pattern interrupt. You don't blow up the FIB building, you just pop the guy doing the voiceover. The problem is what happens after. The agencies survive. The FIB still has its HQ downtown. The IAA still has its satellite dish bunker. News still shows up when your wanted level gets high. Radio chatter after the ending even suggests that the official story gets spun, like always, and the public just eats another version of events. So the game lets you punish individuals, but not dismantle the structure that created them. You can erase Steve Haynes, but some other ambitious agent will take that show, that office, that gun. It's also revealed that Franklin's reward is basically money and a nicer house, not a better world. That limited agency feels very real, and it quietly sets up the idea that the state is bigger than any one villain, even when you finally get to pull the trigger on them. Grab some snacks, because the next layer is how those surviving agencies quietly rewrite the story you just lived through. So while you're sitting in that new Vinewood Hills house, the real question is who actually won from all this? Because if you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks. This is a long one in terms of fallout, and most of it doesn't happen on screen. Steve Haynes is the obvious loser. The game lets you literally watch an FIB celebrity get turned into pink mist on live TV. That one shot quietly wipes out the loudest, most media-hungry face of the Bureau, and it's believed that this doesn't just kill a guy, it kills a whole strategy. The FIB tried to fight the IAA turf war by going public, by turning counter-terror into a reality show, and it blew up in their face. In reality, that kind of embarrassment sticks to an institution for years. The IAA, on the other hand, barely exists to the public. You raid their coastal facility and monkey business, you see their agents at the port and in the jet mission, but regular people in Los Santos mostly just know the FIB logo from Weasel News. That gap already suggests who's better set up to survive a scandal. When Haynes dies and the FIB's internal corruption is all over the news, the IAA can quietly walk into the next budget hearing and say, "Look, our rival just used private contractors, tortured suspects, lost a nerve gas, and got one of their stars sniped on live television." That kind of pitch explains how an agency like the IAA could actually gain power after GTAV ends. They can frame every FIB failure you helped cause as proof that they should be taking the lead on national security, on foreign black ops, even on domestic surveillance in coordination with local law enforcement. It's also revealed that the IAA already has a global reach from ambient dialogue and websites, with agents talking about operations in the Middle East and South America. So giving them a bigger mandate doesn't feel like a stretch. It just feels like turning up a dial that was already running. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how they operate during the story. The FIB drags Michael and Trevor into messy, improvised heists. The IAA tends to show up around cargo, chemicals, planes, and ports, stuff that suggests long supply chains and foreign partners. They're less Vinewood, more Langley. And because they don't have a Steve Haynes doing talk shows, they don't have a Steve Haynes to shoot. So while the FIB burns in public, it's believed that the IAA is tightening its grip in the shadows, picking up contracts, absorbing joint task forces, and quietly rewriting who gets to spy on who. The game never fully confirms that, but the pieces are all sitting there if you look. And the scary part is, once you start looking at who profits from chaos, you realize the turf war might not stop with the feds. And that's where Noose quietly walks in. While the FIB and IAA are busy leaking scandals, doing talk shows, and getting exposed on Cient, Noose almost never gets a named controversy. You don't get a Life Invader post about brave whistleblowers inside Noose. You just get a tactical van, a helicopter, and a guy in a balaclava yelling at you to get on the ground. They're not the schemers, they're the response. In GTA IORV and GTA V, that pattern is really consistent. The FIB is screaming about jurisdiction, the IA is hinting about black sites, and NOOSE just shows up when the stars on your wanted level fill up. It's also revealed that most of the time you even see them, it's because somebody else already messed up. A heist went loud, an agency op went sideways, or a politician needs a photo op of decisive action. They're the muscle that arrives after the story has already been written. That's exactly what makes them durable. As long as there's crime and fear, there's always a justification for a heavily armed response unit. The game constantly feeds that loop. You have terror scares in talk radio, doomsday cults in the desert, Merryweather running around with private armies, and random NPCs talking about home invasions. All of that background noise explains why nobody really questions a federal SWAT analog that can rappel out of a chopper onto your roof at 3 a.m. And if you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how the tech keeps creeping up. Gita already jokes about drones, weaponized vehicles, and militarized cops with toys that used to be military only. It's believed that if the series kept pushing forward in universe, NOOSE would be first in line for autonomous drones over South Los Santos, armored exoskeletons sold as officer safety, and AI facial recognition tied straight into the Weasel newsfeed. In reality, Rockstar is just exaggerating stuff you already see on the news, but in-game it feels normal frighteningly fast. For the average Los Santos citizen, NOOSE turns into part of the landscape, same as the smog over the city or the traffic on the Del Perro freeway. It's just something that exists. You hear a chopper, you see the spotlight sweep over Vespucci, and you assume someone did something to deserve it. The idea that all of this is a policy choice, not gravity, never really comes up during your playthrough because the world treats it as a given. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how security apparatuses work outside the game too. Once you build the HQ, buy the APCs, train the operators, and write the emergency powers into law, it's very hard to roll that back, even in a fictional sandbox where you can blow up a base and then reload your save. NOOSE becomes self-justifying. It exists because crime exists, and crime exists because the game is about crime. But the real question is, if the muscle is this permanent, what happens when the people telling it where to go start changing? So if the people giving orders are constantly rotating, getting blackmailed, or blown up in parking garages, you don't really have to keep track of every single one. You're just lying there, maybe half asleep, maybe grinding contact missions in GTA Online, and this federal fever dream is kind of washing over you while you drive in circles. At this point, the names themselves start to blur in a good way. FIB, IA, NOOSE, repeat. It almost turns into white noise, like the in-game radio but with more perjury. You hear corrupt handler, off-the-books op, counter-terror raid, and even if you ain't sleeping, your brain is doing that thing where it files the vibe away without saving every line of dialogue. You don't need to remember that Three's Company is the one where you dangle a guy out of a chopper. You just remember that the FIB is desperate enough to kidnap their own witness. This is a long one, and the lore can feel dense, but it's also revealed that dense lore is actually perfect for bedtime, because the agencies repeat like a mantra. FIB drags you into a tower, IA drags you into the ocean, NOOSE drops out of the sky when you get too loud. Different scenes, same energy. Everyone's pretending to be in control, while everything is obviously on fire. In reality, that's what you're supposed to feel, not memorize. So don't worry about catching every mission name, or every minor director's title. You don't need to remember which division of NOOSE owns which helicopter, or which IA supervisor signed off on which fake terror plot. The important part is that the government in this world is just as chaotic, petty, and trigger-happy as the criminals it's chasing. That's the joke, and it's believed that once you get that feeling, All the little details we've been dropping just line up in the background like props on a movie set. Pattern interrupt for your brain. If you zoned out for the last 2 minutes, that's fine. You didn't miss a test. You're just letting Los Santos federal bureaucracy play as ambient noise while you drive a stolen car you definitely did not register. If you're still awake, grab some snacks or just shift the pillow. We're heading into the final stretch. From here, we're going to slow things down a bit and zoom out. We've done the shootouts, the raids, the black bag extractions. Next, we're going to talk more about what all of this actually means for the world of Tavi, how the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE shape everyday life, how the media spins their disasters into hero stories, and why the game keeps putting you in the middle of their mess. Think of this as the gentle landing, where the explosions fade out and the big picture stuff quietly clicks into place without jolting you awake. So when that big picture stuff finally clicks, you also get this weird feeling that GTRV is a little too close to the stuff you scroll past on real news feeds. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one emotionally, even if it's just a few missions on your save file. In reality, the FIB is just Rockstar putting a thin Halloween mask on the FBI. You've got implied COINTELPRO style spying, mass surveillance programs, and domestic terror stings that feel like they were written after somebody binge-watched hearings on cable. The is the same deal with the CIA, black sites, torture, off-the-books foreign ops that somehow keep spilling back into Los Santos. News pools from SWAT, and all those images of armored trucks rolling through suburbs during protests. The game never names specific scandals, but it doesn't have to. The silhouettes are familiar enough. What makes it hit is that Rockstar only nudges reality a few inches, then plays it for laughs. In Three's Company, you literally rappel down the FIB tower to kidnap a guy that EA is already torturing, while your handlers argue about budget cuts and ratings like it's a bad office sitcom. Monkey Business has you stealing a nerve agent from a lab guarded by NOOSE. The whole thing is framed as a petty turf war between agencies, not some grand moral crisis. It's also revealed that half the time, the terror threats are manufactured just so someone can look good in front of Congress. The humor is dark because it suggests that the stupidest explanation is usually the right one. And FIB agent will casually mention secret rendition flights, then complain about his parking space. A NOOSE team will level a whole block, then the news calls it a successful joint operation. This would make a lot more sense in the context of pure parody, but you can almost line it up with real headlines and it still tracks. Players usually start out laughing. The missions are over the top, the explosions are big, the banter is ridiculous. But during replays, a lot of people talk about this low-key discomfort that creeps in. When you waterboard Mr. K while Steve Haynes drinks soda and checks his phone, it stops feeling like cartoon villainy and starts feeling like a funhouse version of leaked interrogation reports. When you see noose choppers swarming the city, it's believed that more than a few players thought of real footage they'd rather forget. Gita uses that absurdity to smuggle in serious questions about power and accountability. Who gets to say what a threat is? Who controls the story after the raid, after the torture, after the bombing? And at what point does playing through these operations stop being escapism and start feeling like you're just role-playing the evening news with better music? Next, we're going to zoom back into the characters stuck in the middle of all this, and how being useful to these agencies is the most dangerous job in Los Santos. And this is where it stops being their mess and quietly becomes yours. Because every time the FIB or IAA pulls off something horrible in GTRV, it only really works if you, the player, agree to hit the buttons. Think about the big federal set pieces. The Three's Company extraction on the EA building only happens because you rappel down, you smash the glass, you kidnap Mr. K. The FIB gets their leverage in this turf war because you do the literal heavy lifting while Steve Haynes shouts in your ear. The raid on the IAA lab in Monkey Business, the destruction of evidence in the wrap-up, the off-the-books heists that fund their budget games, all of it is framed as agency operations. But in reality, it's just you doing crimes in a government windbreaker. And the game does not scold you for it. It throws rewards at you. You get cash, you get new missions, you unlock the next chunk of story. The mission pass jingle hits like a little federal paycheck. That structure quietly explains how real systems keep people on board too. Because if you want the promotion, the clearance, or in Los Santos, the next safe house and a new car, you go along. Guita just makes the bribe fun and puts it on your HUD. You might actually hate Steve Haynes. The game makes it very easy. He's smug, he's racist, he's obsessed with his reality show. But you still drag Mr. K into that torture scene. You still fly the chopper. You still snipe on command. Because if you don't, the story doesn't move. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how players talk about seeing all the content. You swallow your disgust so you don't miss the next big set piece. If you ain't sleeping, you're probably grinding those same missions again for money. Rockstar leans into that cognitive dissonance. It's believed that the whole point is to trap you in that gray zone Michael and Franklin live in, where being good or evil is way less important than getting out alive and paid. You're not asked, are you okay with this? You're asked, do you want 20 grand in a cutscene? And most people, very calmly, hit accept. So Guita's sharpest satire isn't just that the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE are cartoon versions of the FBI, CIA, and counter-terror squads. It's also revealed that your own line in the sand is extremely negotiable when the mission design is tight and the music slaps. Grab some snacks. Because next we're going to look at the characters who try to push back against that machine and what the game does to anyone who stops playing along. And if you ain't sleeping yet, this is where the game starts rewarding you for being nosy. Not with big cutscenes, but with tiny throwaway moments that quietly explain why the whole FIB IAA NOOSE ecosystem feels rotten before you even hit a main mission marker. You'll hear it in office chatter. When you sneak through the FIB building during the bureau raid, agents casually complain that a box of evidence went missing in the move, or that a sting went sideways because some analyst mixed up a license plate. It's delivered like workplace gossip, but it suggests entire investigations just vanish because somebody was lazy, corrupt, or both. One guy brags about padding arrest stats with these college kids we swept up, like ruining lives is just part of his quarterly review. NOOSE has its own little horror stories. You throw a snowball at a cop in North Yankton, or bump into the wrong patrol in Blaine County, and suddenly you've got armored trucks, attack choppers, and guys in gas masks acting like you're an invading army. The overreaction is the joke, but it also explains how this city would look from the ground if you weren't the protagonist. One wrong move, full federal response. No questions, just firepower. Then, you've got the background news. You're driving and the radio calmly mentions new joint FIB, NOOSE urban pacification protocols being tested in South Los Santos, right after a segment about budget cuts to schools. Weasel News reports that expanded surveillance powers passed to keep you safe, while the Life Invader-style talk shows mock anyone who's worried as a conspiracy nut. In reality, those lines are telling you why there are cameras everywhere, why helicopters show up so fast, why everyone is on edge. Pattern interrupt for you here. Think about all the stuff you probably skipped. The IAA guy on the radio bragging about enhanced interrogation like it's a spa package. The random NPC who rants that his cousin got tagged as a terror suspect because he bought too much fertilizer for his farm. The Vinewood actor joking that he's on a Knopfler list after criticizing the government on a talk show. None of these are mission critical. but together they paint a system that's casually cruel even when it's off the clock. It's also revealed that a lot of the darkest FIB and IA lore isn't in the big heists, it's in these background scraps. A bulletin board with missing evidence tags, a TV debate where a new spokesperson insists they regret any inconvenience caused by a botched raid that clearly killed civilians, an email chain hinting that an internal investigation quietly died once it reached the wrong name. All of this builds that feeling that the agencies aren't just corrupt when you're around, they're corrupt all the time. You're just seeing the highlights. It's believed that if you line up the radio bits, NPC rants, and office banter, you basically get a shadow documentary about post 9/11 security culture in Los Santos. So if you ain't sleeping, treat every cubicle, every talk show, every angry guy at a bus stop as another puzzle piece. Because next, we're going to look at the rare people inside that puzzle who actually notice how bad it is, and what the game does when they try to speak up. So when you zoom in from that big puzzle of post 9/11 paranoia, you start to see what it actually does to people. Not just bodies on sidewalks, but minds that never really shut off, even when the mission's over and the stars are gone from the wanted level. Michael DeSanta is the clearest example. His entire life in Los Santos is basically one long panic attack with better furniture. The FIB witness protection deal means he wakes up every day knowing his name, his past, and his friends are all technically classified. That explains why you see him in therapy so often, ranting at Dr. Friedlander about feeling trapped, about the lies he told Trevor and Amanda, and about how nothing feels real anymore. It's believed that his nightmares about North Yankton, the prologue heist, and Brad's death are less about the violence and more about that 1 second where he chose to sell everyone out to Dave Norton. Dave, on the other hand, is what it looks like when you stay inside the machine instead of trying to retire from it. Dave Norton was supposed to be a career hero, the guy who killed Michael Townley and made the FIB look strong. In reality, he's this exhausted, middle-aged agent constantly drinking, stressing over audits, and begging Michael to do one more off-the-books job because his whole reputation is built on a lie. Every time you see him on a bench or hiding behind a pillar during missions like the wrap-up, it's also revealed that he's just as scared of exposure as Michael is of Trevor finding out the truth. And if that's what it does to the guys with names, imagine the lower level people, all those FIB grunts you shoot through in the tower, the IA techs in monkey business, the noose teams that swarm you at 4 stars. The game suggests they cope with it using gallows humor and numbness. You hear agents casually joke about torture, or gripe about paperwork after a raid, like kicking down doors and black bagging suspects is just another Tuesday. Some of them probably go home and pretend it's normal, some drink like Dave, and some just quietly accept that their job is lying for a living. Trevor is the opposite of quiet acceptance. Trevor Phillips is what happens when that betrayal actually detonates. His rage at government hypocrisy, at being written off as collateral while Michael gets a mansion, is over the top. But it's rooted in a very simple feeling. You don't sell out family. This would make a lot more sense in the context of his childhood with Mrs. Phillips, where he was already abused and discarded. So finding out the FIB helped rewrite his life just confirms what he always believed. So if you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one about damage you can't see on the minimap. The real power of FIB, IAA, and NOOSE isn't just raids and budgets. It's how they quietly hollow out trust, safety, and sanity, even in people who think they're on the winning side. And next, you'll see what happens when that kind of pressure finally makes someone snap on camera. So after all those raids, briefings, fake IDs, and exploding helicopters, your brain is probably starting to feel like an overworked FIB intern's hard drive. That's fine. At this point, if all the mission names and agency titles are starting to blur together into one long streak of blue jackets and black SUVs, you can just let it do that. Let it all melt down into a single mood instead of a list of facts. Because under all the acronyms and code names, the emotional core is actually pretty simple. You're in a world where the people in charge of safety are just as messy, scared, and greedy as the guys they're chasing down alleyways. And FIB handler like Steve Haynes is basically a loud, TV-friendly version of every crooked cop stereotype. And IAA spook in monkey business is panicking about budget cuts and relevance while he's standing over a supposed bioweapon. The noose teams that drop on you at 4 stars are less elite guardians and more tired office workers with rifles, doing overtime for a system that doesn't really care if they come back. If you ain't sleeping, you could sit here and separate it all out again. FIB is the FBI parody, IAA is the CIA stand-in, Noose is this weird mix of SWAT and Homeland Security. You could remember who blackmailed Michael first, who ordered which off the books op, who leaked what to the news. But if your eyes are getting heavy, it's okay if FIB, IAA, Noose just turns into background noise, like distant sirens in the city. What matters is that you feel Los Santos as a place where unseen power struggles are always humming above the streets, even when you're just stealing a random car. Every time you drove past the FIB tower downtown, or skimmed the IAA building in a stolen helicopter, the game was quietly reminding you that there's a whole second layer of crime, paperwork, and paranoia stacked on top of the usual robberies. It's believed that half the terror threats these agencies talk about are ones they helped create. Radio hosts joke about surveillance while you're literally working for guys who bug phones and fake evidence. In reality, the line between suspect and asset is just whether you're useful this week. So as we slow down a bit, the tone of all this starts to soften too. Longer breaths between the shootouts. More space to notice how tired everyone sounds in those briefing cutscenes. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a city that never really sleeps, but still keeps pretending someone, somewhere, is in control. Next, we'll zoom out one last time and look at what the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE really mean in Chitavi. Not just as enemies or mission givers, but as the final joke about who's actually running the show. So when you zoom out from all the shootouts and shouting, the FIB, IAA, and NOOSE are basically the 3 faces of the same broken system you've been playing around in all night. You're not just running missions for random acronyms. You're getting a guided tour of how San Andreas is really run when the cameras are off and the choppers are already in the air. The FIB is the part you're meant to see. Big glass tower downtown, press conferences, Steve Haynes doing TV spots where he pretends to be a hero while he's literally torturing people off screen. They're public-facing corruption. They care about the story, not the truth, which explains why they stage raids like theater and use you as a prop. When Michael and Trevor hit the IAA building in Three's company, it's sold as a daring rescue, but in reality it's just the FIB trying to win a pissing contest on live news. The IAA is the opposite. No big logo on the Skyline, just that anonymous building by the coast and a bunch of guys who act like every parking lot is foreign soil. They're hidden manipulation, poking at national security to justify anything. It's also revealed that half their work is domestic spying and blackmail, even though they're supposed to look outward. Their agents barely show up in person, which suggests they're the ones pulling strings from a distance, leaking, sabotaging, and letting the FIB take the heat when it all goes wrong. Then you've got NOOSE, who don't really care about image or secrecy. They're the raw force that backs both of them up. When your wanted level spikes and those armored trucks and choppers flood in, that's NOOSE turning federal anxiety into bullets. They're the answer when the FIB spin and the IAA schemes stop working. If you ain't sleeping, you can almost hear the budget justifying itself every time a tactical team ropes in through a window. Together they form this triangle of power. FIB owns the image. IAA owns the secrets. NOOSE owns the violence. Most people in Los Santos just live inside that triangle without ever seeing the corners. Michael, Trevor, and Franklin are the ones who get dragged into all three at once. Michael tries to hide in the FIB's fake respectability. Trevor keeps crashing into the IAA's covert games. And Franklin is the guy stuck driving the getaway car, while Noose tears the streets apart behind him. Their whole story is about navigating that triangle without getting crushed by it. Every heist, every double cross, every awkward meeting on a construction site is them trying to survive a system that doesn't really care if they live, die, or retire to Vinewood Hills, as long as the agencies get their funding and their headlines. And the game wants you to laugh at how absurd it all is. The radio jokes, the Life Invader posts, the way NPCs complain about surveillance during small talk. It's believed that all of that is Rockstar nudging you and saying, "You see how stupid this is, right?" But the uncomfortable part is that a lot of it feels just close enough to reality to sting. So after hearing all this, are you ever going to drive past the FIB tower or hear a news chopper and think it's just background noise again? Grab some snacks, because next we're going even deeper into the people who built that world, and one specific decision that quietly decides who actually walks away. So now you're here, kind of drifting, and we've basically walked the whole maze of the FIB, the IA, and NOOSE already. You've gone from the glass tower downtown, to that concrete bunker on the coast, to the guys rappelling out of choppers when you get a little too brave with the rocket launcher. At this point, you don't really need every mission name in your head. You can just let it blur a bit. Three's Company, the wrap-up, Monkey Business, it's all just flashes of Michael hanging off a chopper, Franklin on a sniper rifle, Trevor yelling into a headset while two agencies argue about jurisdiction over one terrified scientist. If you're half asleep, that's fine. Just keep the atmosphere. Picture Los Santos from way up. A neon grid, tail lights sliding along the freeway, the FIB logo glowing on that downtown monolith. And somewhere out over the ocean, a quiet IA facility pretending it doesn't exist. In reality, the city looks calm, but you already know there's a whole invisible chess match going on above it. You've seen how the FIB leans on washed-up bank robbers because they can't win the budget war with the IA. You've watched NOOSE roll in as the blunt instrument when the quiet stuff fails. It's believed that half the people calling the shots never even step outside their offices. They just move pieces, sign forms, and let guys like you eat the wanted level. If you ain't sleeping, you can notice the little details that tie it all together. The way the news stations spin every shootout into a successful counter-terror operation. The way news shows up like a storm whenever the number of stars gets too high. It's also revealed that even background chatter on the radio suggests these agencies are constantly leaking on each other, but nobody ever really cleans house. Or you can just let it all fade. Let the acronyms turn into a soft hum in the back of your mind. FIB, IA, NOOSE. Just 3 letters at a time, like distant sirens you're not sure are in the game or outside your window. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a loud shootout, but right now it's just another bedtime story about people in suits making bad choices. If you're somehow still awake, you can queue up another lore deep dive after this, or just let this one loop as background noise while you drift. The city will keep going either way. There are always more files, more missions, more secrets sitting on that caseboard, pins and yarn and redacted names waiting for you to come back. But for tonight, those federal floodlights are dimming, the choppers are pulling back to their pads, and the people upstairs are closing their laptops, leaving Los Santos to glow quietly on its own for a while. So we'll leave it with the lights going soft. The camera drifts back from that FIB lobby we've been talking about, past the metal detectors and the board security guards, up through the glass where Steve Haynes used to rehearse his fake concern before going live. You float higher, easing past the lit floors and the dark ones, until the whole FIB tower is just another rectangle in the downtown skyline. Off to the side, the IAA's anonymous little block of concrete is sitting there too, pretending it's not important, which in reality just makes it feel even more suspicious. Behind all those tinted windows, it's believed that somebody is still staring at a screen with your name, your phone, your Life Invader page on it. The shot keeps pulling back, over the freeway ribbons, past the noose chopper pads where the rotors are finally cooling down, out toward the pier lights and the red beacons on the wind turbines. Los Santos at night is laid out like a mini-map someone forgot to close. Every district glowing, every alley still loaded with side characters we didn't even have time to mention. If you ain't sleeping, and your brain's still making little routes between all these places, you can kind of see the whole K-Sport at once. If you want to help this city tour keep going, you can like the video, or subscribe, or just save it so you can drop back in the next time you're trying to knock out. No pressure. This is a long one, and it's meant to be the kind of thing you put on, roll over, and maybe only hear half of before your controller slips out of your hand. Next time you boot up GTA V, maybe don't sprint straight into a mission. Just walk your character out to the FIB Tower Plaza and stand there for a minute. Listen to the air conditioning hum, the distant sirens, the helicopter you can't quite see. Or drive up near the yacht facility on the coast, kill the engine, and let the ocean mix with that low security buzz. It's also revealed that the game is weirdly good at these quiet sounds when you're not firing a minigun, because that's kind of what this channel is for. Long, cozy lore rambles about a world that is absolutely falling apart, delivered slow enough that you can actually relax inside the chaos for a while. If you want more of that, you know where to find it. As we fade all the way out, just hold the map of Los Santos in your head for a second. Somewhere in that grid, right now, the FIB is still signing off on bad ideas, the IAA is still running go stops, and NOOSE is still waiting by the chopper, whether you're awake to see it or not.